Chapter 325. The melodious sound of the zither reverberates in the air, but the dark cloud spirit flower not far away still has no reaction. Although Mu Yang is already mentally prepared, she still regretfully stops guiding Di Mingju to play. Turning to face Di Mingju's unsatisfied face, Mu Yang opens her mouth to appease him. It's alright, this isn't your fault. It's my zither that's a bit special. Apart from me and Xiao Bao, it's useless for anyone else to play. Moreover, this method might not be right, I'll think of something else. Mu Yang hasn't finished her words. Di Mingju narrows his eyes in displeasure, his fingers still resting on the zither strings suddenly pluck. Clang. There was a sound. In a split second, the surroundings of the Tianmo Qin seem to form a wave of air that sweeps out. It's like a gust of wind and huge waves have risen in the medicine field. Countless drafts and weeds shake violently, even snapping. And after the sound of the zither, the 4 blue flower buds that were originally budding actually slowly open up a little bit of a gap at a speed visible to the naked eye. A strong and refreshing fragrance pervades the entire courtyard. Mu Yang instinctively takes a deep breath. Her body and mind are indescribably comfortable. She even has an illusion that her qi that has been shackled for a long time, her bottleneck seems to be faintly loosening. This method is really effective. The dark cloud spirit flower's bloom requires a higher level of energy than mysterious energy, that is, spiritual energy. And Di Mingju is the same as Xiao Bao, he doesn't need to recognize a master to manipulate the Tianmo Qin. Wait a minute. Mu Yang abruptly comes back to her senses, looking unkindly at Di Mingju. You can drive the sound of the zither and make the dark cloud spirit flower bloom without playing the zither. Di Mingju steps closer to her, his voice heavy. That's right. Did you just play with me? Mu Yang grits her teeth. No. Di Mingju denies it as he bends down and gives her a light peck on her lips. It's to collect a reward. Mu Yang, regarding this man's increasingly shameless actions and thick-skinned behavior, she's actually left speechless. On the side, Han Yi and Ying Mai are dumbstruck as they watch. Is this still that cold, aloof, and unapproachable Jun Shong of theirs? Moreover, why do they always feel stifled in their hearts, wanting to turn their heads and leave? Out of sight, out of mind. If Han Yi had read Bailey Liuin's notes, he would know that there's a phrase called feeding dog food. As long as Jun Shong and Miss Muyan are together, he will be constantly fed dog food. It was especially unrequited. However, Ying Mai, who had a crush on Miss Jun, must be even sadder than him. Han Yi feels that his gloominess is just fleeting clouds. He must pull little shadow back from the wrong path. The barrier around the dark cloud spirit flower's flower bud has been broken. Next, the flower's full bloom is Mu Yang's matter. A zither melody that was several times more pleasing to the ear rang out. Just like that, Mu Yang sits cross-legged on the ground. Her white clothes and black hair are gently blown by the breeze. She faintly smiled, her jade-like fingers gently moving, her watery eyes, under the sunlight, seemed to be able to create layers of ripples, stirring up one's heart. Di Mingju's eyes stare unblinkingly at the young girl in front of him. The flame in his eyes is suppressed, hidden, but it seems like it could start a prairie fire at any time, no longer able to be controlled, no longer able to endure. As the music flowed, an invisible energy field spread out, enveloping the entire courtyard. Chapter 326. Many of the herbs in the medicine field are rare drafts, and it takes at least 10 years for them to grow. But during this time, they have already harvested several batches. That's because every time Muyan plays the Tianmo Qin and activates the flourishing prosperity skill, the 4 seasons will change in the entire courtyard, and the vegetation will grow wildly. And as Muyan's skill matures, the number of times the 4 seasons will change from 1 to 2, 3, 4. Di Mingju already knew that the woman he likes isn't ordinary. The Shun musician is even more extraordinary. But seeing the scene of the 4 seasons changing in the courtyard, his pupils still slightly contract. The legendary Shun musician, his Muyan, seems to be more special and powerful than he imagined. But also, more dangerous. Whatever happens in this courtyard, not a shred of it can be leaked out. Di Mingju lowers his voice, coldly instructing Han Yi. The sound of the zither alone can give birth to all things, and even make the dark cloud spirit flower bloom. If such news were to spread, the entire Yenwu continent would probably be turned upside down. No. Not only the Yenwu continent, even the Shozhen continent would, and at that time, Muyan's identity as a Shun musician might not be concealed. Han Yi abruptly comes back to his senses and promptly bows. Master, rest assured, the guards around are all trusted subordinates. Other people can't come to the medicine garden. Miss Muyan's uniqueness will never be known by anyone else. As the music slowly comes to an end, Muyan opens her eyes and looks at the dark cloud spirit flower with a frightening brightness. Normally, she would be so tired that she almost collapses after using the flourishing prosperity for a few hours. She needs the assistance of the echo sound to recover. But today, when she's playing, her nose is filled with the fragrance of the dark cloud spirit flower. This fragrance seems to have a spiritual nature, drilling straight into her lungs, into her meridians and qi. All her tiredness is swept away under the nourishment of this fragrance, and her dried-up internal force is once again filled up. Moreover, Muyan is sure that it's not her illusion. Smelling the fragrance of the dark cloud spirit flower, her bottleneck really loosens. Although it's only a little. She can't help but approach the dark cloud spirit flower, reaching out and gently touching the crystal-clear petals. The petals gently sway on her fingertips, and the fragrance becomes more and more intense, as if responding to her. Muyan only felt that she was liking this flower more and more. Di Mingju. She gets up and looks at the man standing not too far away. These dark cloud spirit flowers, can you give me one? She had cultivated a total of 4 dark cloud spirit flowers. Even if Di Mingju needs dark cloud spirit flowers, he shouldn't need as many as 4, right? Di Mingju takes a step closer. You want the dark cloud spirit flower? Mu Yang repeatedly nods. What will you trade for it? These words stump Muyan. After all, Di Mingju's origins are beyond her imagination. Presumably, he simply doesn't fancy ordinary drafts or treasures. She asked hesitantly, can I pay? I don't lack money. Then what do you lack? Mu Yang wrinkled her nose and thought, no matter what he lacked, she would think of a way to help this man get it. Di Mingju slowly bends down, whispering in her ear, Ben Jun only lacks you. Mu Yang. Can you still speak properly? He takes a deep breath. Jun Shongdaran really knows how to joke. Ben Jun never jokes. Di Mingju coldly replies. Chapter 327. Looking at the man's resolute departing figure, Muyan suddenly feels stifled. What's so great about it? At worst she'll just go back and cultivate the remaining 2 seeds of the dark cloud spirit flower. However, thinking that the blooming of the dark cloud spirit flower requires Di Mingju's assistance, she can only sigh helplessly. How can this man be so stingy? She's the one who painstakingly raised this flower. Sure enough, her dear Xiaobao is the best. In just 6 short days, she misses her baby so much that she's going crazy. Perhaps it's because the dark cloud spirit flower is about to bloom. Muyan tosses and turns all night, unable to sleep well. She only hopes to see Xiaobao as soon as possible. At dawn, she gets up and goes to the medicine garden. Just as she enters the courtyard, she hears faint screams coming from the west side of the house. Ah, little shadow, do you want to kill me? Taking you to the brothel, isn't that good for you? I'll let you open your eyes and broaden your horizons, then you'll know that there are many women in this world. Don't hit me, I was wrong, okay? I won't dare to do it again, but I advise you, Miss Jun is masters, you must not have any wishful thinking. That's fatal. Immediately after, there's a bang in the silence of the morning. There's also the youngster's cold voice, idiot, is your brain made of tofu? Mu Yang snorts out a laugh. This Han Yi is really a clown. And he's so stupid. Being together with Ying Mai day and night, when will he find out that Ying Mai is a woman? Muyan curls up the corner of her lips and slowly walks in the direction of the dark cloud spirit flower. After taking a few steps, Ying Mai silently caught up to her and stood half a body's length away from her on the left. Muyan turns sideways and casts a sidelong glance at her, smiling faintly. Beauty, I heard that you're wishful thinking about me. It just so happens that I've been longing for you day and night, why don't you just follow me? Saying that, she reaches out and hooks Yingmai's chin, with the posture of a hedonistic tyrant teasing a beauty. Yingmai's face flushes red all of a sudden, bewildered. After a long while, she helplessly says, Miss Jun, don't make trouble. Everything about this Miss Jun was good, but she especially liked to tease her. Mu Yang laughed heartily again before letting go of her chin. However, he did not retract his hand. Instead, he directly grabbed her wrist and pulled her to stand at the same level as him. Come, follow me to see the dark cloud spirit flower. Yingmai moved her hand, as if she wanted to break free. After Mu Yang grabbed her again, she blushed slightly, but allowed Mu Yang to drag her forward. Miss Jun's fingers on her wrist were very warm, as if they had warmed her heart. His chest, which was usually in unbearable pain, felt warm at this moment. Ever since her entire clan was massacred and she shouldered a sea of blood vengeance, she had never felt so relaxed and peaceful as she did at this moment. Yingmai couldn't help but glance at the young girl beside him, and the light in his eyes grew brighter and brighter. What are you looking at me for? Mu Yang suddenly turns her head and glances at her with a smile. Don't tell me I'm prettier than the dark cloud spirit flower? All of a sudden, Yingmai meets Mu Yan's teasing eyes. She blushes to her ears and doesn't know where to place her hands and feet. Taking a deep breath, she follows Mu Yang's line of sight. Under the sunlight, the dark cloud spirit flower's blue branches and leaves are sparkling and translucent, as if she could see the gurgling juice inside. Chapter 328. A fresh fragrance filled the air. It was very light, but it made people feel relaxed and happy. This was the legendary dark cloud spirit flower. It was truly beautiful. However, in Yingmai's heart, he really felt that Miss Jun was more beautiful than the dark cloud spiritual flower. Mu Yang gently touches the petals of the dark cloud spirit flower. The young sprouts gently sway, as if beckoning to her. She remembered the ancient records in the space. When the petals of the dark cloud spirit flower turned into the deep blue color of the deep sea, this meant that the dark cloud spirit flower had truly matured. Today's performance might not even take 8 hours. Soon, she would be able to collect the stamen of the dark cloud spirit flower. Just as Mu Yan is about to take out the Tianmo Qin, a white light suddenly flashes before her eyes, and a chubby rabbit appears at her feet. Hey! Mu Yang grabs the collar of the fat rabbit and picks it up. Her face is full of curiosity. I thought you, fat rabbit, had already fallen asleep in the space? So you're still alive? The rabbit blinks its mung-bin eyes at Mu Yan, looking very innocent. Then he glares at his leg, signaling Mu Yang to put it down. His eyes were anxiously looking in the direction of the dark cloud spirit flower. Mu Yang lets go of it, but she narrows her eyes and says with a dangerous expression, If you dare to eat this dark cloud spirit flower, I'll eat stir-fried rabbit meat tonight. The fat rabbit shuddered and raised its face, its eyes looking even more innocent and fawning. He nudged his chubby body to the side of the dark cloud spirit flower. He didn't touch the dark cloud spirit flower. Instead, he knelt down very close to the petals. It even took a deep breath like a human, and a look of enjoyment appeared in its beady eyes. Mu Yan suspiciously looks at it for a while. Seeing that it really didn't touch the dark cloud spirit flower, she takes out the Tianmo Qin and begins to play. Yingmai's gaze couldn't help but land on the fat rabbit. His brows furrowed slightly, revealing a hint of curiosity. The rabbit's appearance seemed very ordinary, but Yingmai always felt that it had a strange aura, which made her feel that it was troublesome and in awe. The sound of the zither rang out, and the celestial sound lingered in the air. The plants in the courtyard swayed enchantingly. At the same time, the chubby rabbit was also shaking its head in fascination. As the song reached its climax, the fragrance of the dark cloud spirit flower became stronger. The fat rabbit was so excited that it rolled over and almost crushed a few herbs. No one noticed that the originally snow-white fur on the fat rabbit's body had become even more glossy and smooth after this zither song, sparkling like jade. A pair of mung-bin eyes looked at Mu Yang, filled with excitement and agitation. It was right to follow its young master and the female devil. Even in a damned place like the Yenwu continent, it can still advance. As the sound of the zither falls, Muyan puts away the Tianmo Qin and looks at the 4 stalks of dark cloud spirit flowers, her eyes filled with amazement. The petals, which were already beautiful to begin with, were now as translucent as blue ice crystals. It was breathtakingly beautiful. The stamen in the center of the flower swayed gently in the wind. It was the only color other than blue on the dark cloud spirit flower. Mu Yang held her breath, took out the jade box, and prepared to collect the stamens. But before he could stretch out his hand, he heard a sharp and furious bellow behind him. "What are you doing?" Muyan stares blankly. Just as she is about to get up, she feels a huge force knocking her away. The flustered and exasperated voice sounded again. "Are you crazy? You know what this is, yet you dare to touch it at will." Yingmai's eyes and hands are quick, supporting Muyan. He looks at the newcomer with an extremely unfriendly expression. Muyan also looks over. Chapter 329. He saw that the person who came was a little girl wearing a green dress and had her hair combed into a double-ringed bun. Her appearance could be considered delicate and cute, but the arrogance on her face made her look harsh. When the little girl looks up and sees Muyan's appearance, a trace of amazement flashes through her eyes. Then, his brows furrowed even more. With her hands on her hips, she shouted at Mu Yang, "Do you know that this dark cloud spirit flower is something that my family's miss wants to use to refine pills? What if you break it?" Mu Yang narrows her eyes. "Who are you?" The fat rabbit at her feet bared his teeth and made a strange grumbling noise. Ying Mai's expression became even colder. He took a step forward and was about to make a move. She would not allow anyone to humiliate Miss June. However, the little girl sneered disdainfully. "Me? I'm Shixianzi's personal maid. I'm here on the orders of my young miss to collect the stamens of the dark cloud spirit flower. According to my young miss calculations, the dark cloud spirit flower will bloom at noon today. Luckily I came early, otherwise, this precious dark cloud spirit flower would have been destroyed by a village girl like you." Village girl? This woman actually dares to say that Muyan is a village girl. Not to mention Ying Mai's chilling killing intent, even the black-clothed guard at the side revealed an extremely displeased expression. Their Miss Jun was able to grow a dark cloud spirit flower that no one had been able to cultivate for thousands of years. It can make the 4 seasons change in the entire medicine garden, and the drafts grow crazily. The rare and precious drafts that have grown in the medicine garden these past few days have directly benefited these black-clothed guards. Their Miss Jun is also a famous enchantress of medicine in Tianyuan City. She can bring the dead back to life and snatch a life from the hands of the King of Hell. Such a powerful person was actually called a country bumpkin. Where did this woman get her face from? As if sensing the killing intent in the surroundings, the maid shrunk her neck and revealed a trace of fear. But very quickly, she puffs out her chest and says with a cold snort, "Our miss was personally invited by the owner of this courtyard from the Ghost City. If you dare to disrespect me, aren't you afraid that your master will skin you alive?" As soon as these words came out, the black-clothed guard's expression changed. Even Ying Mai was startled, the murderous aura on her body vanishing without a trace. Someone invited by Jun Shong? Seeing the change in these people's expressions and actions, the maid becomes more and more complacent. Raising her chin, she arrogantly says, "Do you know how many people in the entire Yenwu continent want to move our miss? It is your greatest honor that our young miss is willing to come here. Shixianzi, your young lady, is it Shilanling?" Mu Yang suddenly asked. The maid glanced at her in astonishment, then became even more arrogant. "At least you have some knowledge." "That's right, Shilanling is my family's young miss. However, my young miss's name is not something that a village girl like you can casually call out." Ying Mai's eyes sharpened, wishing he could tear this person who had humiliated Miss June. But remembering that this was someone invited by Jun Shong, she suppressed her anger. However, Mu Yang's eyes slightly focused, and did not bother with the maid. Because she remembered her past life. This Shi Lanling, the name of Fairy Shi, was like thunder piercing the ears in his previous life. In her past life, up until Muyan's death, there were only 2 alchemists in the entire Yenwu continent. One was Gong Qianshue's senior brother, a brilliant disciple of the Heavenly Road sect, Jian Feng. The other was the ghost city's Shalanling, Shishenzi. Only, compared to Jen Feng's unrestrained sharpness. Chapter 330. Shalanling was even more low-key, or it could be said that she mainly served the ghost city. Unless she goes through the ghost city's relationship, she won't easily make a move. Therefore, he was not as famous as Jen Feng. But back then, Mu Yang had heard Gong Chenxue say that this Shalanling's alchemy level was not inferior to Jen Feng's. He saw that Mu Yan was in a trance and was silent. It seemed that she was frightened by the name of her miss. The maid couldn't help but sneer. Her expression was arrogant, but her tone was slightly better. Don't blame me for what I said just now. My family's young miss has been waiting for this dark cloud spirit flower for a long time. You're just a village girl who doesn't understand medicine, so it's best if you don't touch it. The cultivation of the dark cloud spirit flower is extremely difficult. In order to give it to my family's young miss, the owner of this courtyard spent a great deal of effort. If you accidentally kill it, even if you were to be skinned and sold, you wouldn't be able to afford it. Mu Yan slowly lifts her eyes. You said that these flowers are for Shalanling? Of course. The maid looked at her with disdain. Did you know that your master had already found my young miss a month ago and said that he would send the stamen of the dark cloud spirit flower within a month for my young miss to refine pills? It's just that my young miss knows how precious the dark cloud spirit flower is. She's afraid that you won't be able to pick it well with your rough hands and feet, so she sent me over to take a look. It's fortunate that I came. Otherwise, the dark cloud spirit flower that the noble had specially cultivated for my family's young miss would have been killed by a clumsy village girl like you. The corners of Mu Yan's lips slowly curl up, a bright and beautiful smile blooming on her beautiful face. However, the more enchanting her smile was, the colder her eyes became. So that's why the dark cloud spirit flower is so important to him. Yingmai looks at Mu Yan anxiously. He wants to say something, but he can't say a word. She has been by Jun Shong's side for so many years that she understands him better than anyone else. Aside from Miss Jun, there has never been a woman in this world who can make Jun Shong speak to her in a friendly manner. Even Tian Yi Men's successor Leng Qingwan, Jun Shong has never paid any attention to her. Let alone this so-called Shishenzi. Miss Jun, don't misunderstand, Jun Shong he treats you. Before Yingmai could finish his words, the maid coldly stared at him. A pair of eyes with scrutiny and disgust, scanning Mu Yang up and down. Then, he spits, so you're the vixen that they've been talking about, the one who seduces nobles all day long? I heard that you're the one in charge of growing this dark cloud spirit flower. Heh. A country bumpkin, a gardener. Don't tell me that she thinks she can climb into the master's bed just because of her looks. Bah, how shameless. Luckily you didn't touch the dark cloud spirit flower just now. Otherwise, this pure and holy flower would have been tainted by you. As she spoke, the maidservant took out a jade box and bent down to pick the dark cloud spirit flower. Roar. The fat rabbit crouching beside Mu Yang suddenly lets out a beast-like roar. His entire body bounced up and crashed into the maidservant. His tiny eyes were filled with anxiety. But it was still a step too late. The moment the maid's hand touches the dark cloud spirit flower, the dark cloud spirit flower that Mu Yang had painstakingly cultivated for 6 days and played for 8 hours a day, withers at a speed visible to the naked eye. Everyone at the scene widens their eyes, aghast at this scene. Mu Yang's heart tightens, an indescribable sadness and sourness welling up in her heart. Chapter 331. Listening to her zither every day, gently swaying when she touches them, it's like they have a life of their own, clinging to her and responding to her. But at this moment, one of the beautiful and fragile little flowers has withered. Mu Yan can even feel the loss of a breath of life in the air. The maidservant's face is filled with panic. She looks at the remaining black ash in her hand, the withered leaves of the dark cloud spirit flower. Then she looks at Mu Yan and the fat rabbit that has already jumped back to her side. She suddenly screams, "It's you, you must have done something to make this dark cloud spirit flower wither, isn't it? That's right, you must be jealous that my family's miss has gotten the nobleman's favor, so you instigated that rabbit to deliberately kill the dark cloud spirit flower. I'm not done with you." Saying that, She takes a step and suddenly pounces towards Muyin. Releasing her formidable internal force, she's actually at the peak of Earth stage. However, before the maidservant can get close to Muyin, Yingmai steps forward and stretches out her hand to block her way. Yingmai's gaze is indescribably cold. She's always liked to kill to stop killing, and use violence to curb violence. This woman dares to insult Muyin. If it was in normal times, she would have already been ruthlessly tortured to death. Meeting Yingmai's eyes, the maidservant shudders, and even the internal force that was originally condensed in her palm disperses due to fear. She trembles and opens her mouth. What do you want to do? I'm Shuxian's personal maidservant. If you hurt me, the nobleman won't let you off. Yingmai sneers, her gaze like a knife. I'll kill you and bury you in the ground. No one will know that you've been here. Do you want to try? The maidservant widens her eyes in horror and is about to speak. Suddenly, she catches a glimpse of several figures out of the corner of her eye. She leans back and directly falls to the ground, then lets out a pained wail. It hurts. What do you want to do? You destroyed the dark cloud spirit flower, and now you want to kill me to silence me. Woo woo woo. Yingmai suddenly raises her head and sees the figures coming this way. She promptly kneels down on one knee, paying respects to Jun Shong. The black-clothed guards in the courtyard kneel down, paying respects to Jun Shong. In a split second, Muyin is the only one standing alone in the courtyard. Di Ming Ju looks towards her. The girl's skin was so white that it was almost transparent under the sunlight. Her long eyelashes drooped slightly, covering the light in her eyes. The corners of her mouth curled up slightly, revealing a faintly discernible charming smile. However, this smile did not have the slightest bit of temptation and slyness that it usually had. Instead, it had a trace of coldness. Di Ming Ju frowns, coldly saying, "What's going on?" The crying maid secretly opened her eyes to look at the man walking over. Her eyes were filled with amazement. Her face turned red with embarrassment. In her entire life, she had never seen a man who could be as handsome as this mysterious nobleman in front of her. That celestial appearance, that noble aura that looked down on the world, it was no wonder that even the otherworldly young miss was captivated by this person's elegance. The maid sees that Di Ming Ju is getting closer and closer. Impatience floats up in her eyes because she doesn't get an answer. She quickly calmed herself down and sat up on her knees. With a sobbing tone, she said, "Young master. Yesterday, the guards by your side came to inform young miss that the dark cloud spirit flower would bloom today. Young miss was worried that the dark cloud spirit flower would be damaged in the process of collecting it, so she specifically let this servant come over to take a look, and also let this servant personally pick the stamens of the dark cloud spirit flower." Chapter 332. The maid turns around and points indignantly at Mu Yang. It's her. She actually intended to steal the dark cloud spirit flowers, and even indulged her pet to trample on them. Although this servant hurriedly stepped forward to stop her, it was still too late. One of the precious dark cloud spirit flowers had already been killed by her. Saying that, the maid points to the withered dark cloud spirit flower, her tears falling even more fiercely. An appearance as if she had really suffered all kinds of grievances. Yingmai listens to her inverting black and white words, and her complexion turns somewhat pale with anger. But she has never been good with words, and the black-clothed guards in the courtyard are also taciturn people. Jun Shong, it's not like what she said. Miss Jun didn't. If it's not like this, then what? The maid yells. Do you dare say that she didn't just want to steal the dark cloud spirit flower? Do you dare say that you weren't threatening me just now, trying to kill me to silence me? Yingmai's face flushes, her hands tightly clenched into fists, but she can't say a word. She has always been good at using her sword and fists to talk. But this time, the one being wrongly accused is Miss Jun. She will not allow it. Yingmai takes a step forward, about to speak, but a hand presses down on her shoulder. Mu Yang slowly steps forward, pats her shoulder, and shows her a faint smile. Then she casually looks at Di Ming Ju. I destroyed the flower, so what? Mu Yang's voice is bone-chilling. Even those peach blossom eyes, which are usually gleaming with light, seem to have condensed into frost. Di Ming Ju instinctively doesn't like to see such an expression on her face, and his brows slightly wrinkle. When the maid hears her words, She immediately shouts, "Gongzi, listen," she admitted it. "You did it on purpose, didn't you? Deliberately destroying my family's Miss Dark Cloud's spirit flower." Mu Yang looks at her, her eyes indifferent, her expression unspeakably careless. "Yes, I did it on purpose. What can you do to me? These Dark Cloud spirit flowers were planted by me. I don't want to give even one to your families, miss. What can you do to me?" Saying that, she raises her hand, about to take away the remaining 3 Dark Cloud spirit flowers. She doesn't want to experience what happened just now, watching with her own eyes as the flowers she had cultivated wither and wither, her life vanishing. However, his profound chi had not even touched the Dark Cloud spirit flower. Di Mingju grabs her wrist. With his Shen Qi controlled, the Dark Cloud spirit flower naturally couldn't be kept. Muyan abruptly raises her head to look at Di Mingju. There's finally a trace of annoyance in her eyes. "Let go." Not only does Di Mingju not let go, his fingertips gently stroke her wrist, as if he's flirting. "Be good. I still have use for these Dark Cloud spirit flowers." "Obedient, my ass. You want to use the Dark Cloud spirit flower that this lady painstakingly planted to please your lover. Di Mingju, do you want to die or do you want to die?" The maidservant was startled by this scene. Wasn't this noble's attitude towards the gardener a little too intimate? Could it be that he was really seduced by this foxy gardener? "Young master, this person deliberately killed the Dark Cloud spirit flower. You must not let her off easily." Di Mingju coldly looks at the maid, but doesn't say anything. At the side, Han Yi steps forward, beaming. "Oh, then what do you think we should do?" The maid immediately says, "The Dark Cloud spirit flower is something that Gongzi wants to give to my family's miss. Which one of them isn't priceless? It's hard to find in this world. What's more important is Gongzi's feelings towards my family's miss." Chapter 333. I think we should just make her compensate with a Dark Cloud spiritual flower and whip her 100 times as a warning to others. When she says these words, the maid looks at Muyan with eyes full of malice and ridicule. She was sure that this mysterious nobleman had a good impression of her young miss. Otherwise, why would he say that he would give such a precious Dark Cloud spirit flower to the young miss? So what if this foxy gardener shamelessly tried to seduce people? Once the young miss made her move, it would be a piece of cake to deal with this thing. Muyan looks up at Di Mingju, smiling like a flower, killing Jun Shong's intentions for his lover. Muyan really deserves to die 1,000 deaths. As he says this, the mysterious energy in his hands suddenly revolves, breaking free from Di Mingju's bindings in a split second. Who knew that as soon as his hand broke free, his waist would be grabbed? The distance between the two of them became even closer. Muyan is going crazy with anger. But Di Mingju seems to be looking at a mischievous child. His voice is clear and cold, carrying a helpless pampering tone. "Don't make trouble. Or, do you want to be closer to Ben Jun? Mu Yang. She really wants to castrate this bastard." The maid is shocked and resentful as she looks at Muyan, who is getting closer to Di Mingju. The light in her eyes turns from complacent to bitter resentment. But he hears Han Yi continue to smile and ask, "The Dark Cloud spirit flower is a rare plant, it's hard to find in this world. To find another one is almost an impossible matter. This request seems a bit too much." When the maid hears Han Yi's words, her eyes immediately brighten. It turned out that this foxy charmer had not completely hooked the noble's heart. She had damaged young Mrs. Dark Cloud's spiritual flower, so she had to compensate as well. The maid composed herself. It's precisely because the Dark Cloud spirit flower is hard to find in this world that she has to compensate. I remember my young miss saying that if the Dark Cloud spirit flower were to appear in this world, it would be worth at least 10 million gold coins. Since she couldn't take out a single Dark Cloud spiritual flower, she would have to compensate him with gold coins. Also, there's no way you can escape the 100 lashes. Han Yi blinks. 10 million gold coins, that's not a small number, right? I'm afraid an ordinary person wouldn't be able to earn that much even after several lifetimes. She only has herself to blame. The maid's eyes brighten as she stares at Muyan, her eyes brimming with malice. If she really can't come up with the money, I think it's not bad to sell her to the Ghost City's Ren Ku. With her beauty, She could definitely be sold for a good price. When the time comes, I'll work like a cow or a horse in the ghost city for several decades. There will be a day when I can gather 10 million gold coins. As soon as he said that, everyone's expression changed. Even Han Yi's eyes are a little heavy. Not to mention Di Mingju. His eyes were already surging with a thick dark red killing intent. Yingmai thinks that Di Mingju really wants to punish Muyan because of the dark cloud spirit flower. Bending a knee, he instantly knelt down. My lord, the dark cloud spirit flower was killed by this subordinate. If there is a need for compensation, please let this subordinate do it. Please do not wrongly accuse Miss June. Muyang frowns and wants to step forward to help her up. But Di Mingju has already taken the initiative to release her, slowly standing in front of the already withered dark cloud spirit flower. If you damaged something, you should compensate according to the price and accept the punishment. It's very fair. The man's voice was bone-chilling, making everyone present shiver uncontrollably. But the meaning of those words makes the maid wild with joy. She even forgets to be afraid of that ruthless murderous intent in the air. She proudly looks at Muyan, waiting to see this woman's miserable end. But how can you prove that she was the one who killed the flower? Chapter 334. The maid stares blankly, then immediately says, I saw it with my own eyes, I'm a witness. Witness? There's no need. Di Mingju hooks up the corners of his lips, as if he's smiling. But the bloodthirst and coldness in his eyes make his handsome face look particularly dangerous. Ben Jun has better evidence. As soon as his voice falls, a powerful energy strikes at the withered spirit flower. Flames soar, and the withered branches and leaves are burned to nothing. In the next moment, a wisp of black gas comes out of the smoke, flying straight towards the maid. Han Yi sneers, I forgot to tell you, the spirit flower of the dark clouds was also known as the flower of the Holy Spirit in ancient times. Because it can only accept the watering of the purer and purer aura. Before, what made the spirit flower of the dark clouds grow was the purest internal force in Miss Jun's body. Therefore, from then on, those whose aura isn't as pure as Miss Jun's, as long as they touch the spirit flower, the dark cloud spirit flower will come into contact with the filthy energy and die. So for the past 6 days, no one in our courtyard has dared to approach the spirit flower of the dark clouds, and no one dares to touch it. The maid widens her eyes in horror. No, that's impossible. How can there be such a strange spiritual flower in this world? But she hears Han Yi continue, there's one more thing I forgot to tell you. The spirit flower of the dark clouds is a very vengeful flower. Because it only has 7 days to live, the spirit flower of the dark clouds treasures its time to grow. Therefore, once the filthy energy causes them to die, the withered flowers and leaves will lock in and strengthen the filthy energy. Once the flowers and leaves are completely burned or decayed, the filthy energy will return to its owner. The black smoke seems to have a spiritual nature, and pounces straight at the maid. The maid frantically tries to dodge, but she simply can't escape the black smoke. After a few short breaths, her face is completely wrapped up in the black smoke. Ah 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 ah. A mournful scream pierces the sky. The maid wails in anguish, desperately rolling on the ground. This kind of pain lasts for no less than a quarter of an hour, before the black smoke slowly dissipates, revealing the maid's pitch-black banana face. If one were to say, the maid's face could be considered pretty and pleasing, with red lips and white teeth. But right now, all that's left of her is a patch of blackness, even her teeth are black and yellow. Unspeakably ugly. She was even more like a village girl than a village girl. Phut. Cough cough. One of the guards in black couldn't help but laugh out loud. He was so scared that he quickly held it in. Ha 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 ha. Han Yi doesn't want to endure it at all. He holds his stomach and leans on Yingmai, laughing so hard that he can't stand straight. Ha ha ha, little shadow, look at that face of hers, don't you think it looks like a briquette? Yingmai pushes Han Yi away in disgust. Seeing the maid's appearance, she can't help but curve up the corners of her lips. Mu Yang is also somewhat dumbfounded. She didn't know that the dark cloud spirit flower still had such abilities after it died. This method of revenge was truly ingenious. Poochie. Di Mingju looks at the smile on her face, and the coldness between his brows finally recedes a little, turning into a gentle pampering. The maid touched her face. When she put her hand down from her face, she saw that her palm was pitch black. This kind of blackness could not be erased or washed away no matter what. She was originally quite confident in her appearance and had always fantasized about being able to follow the young miss and marry the handsome son-in-law together with the young miss. But now, everything was destroyed. Chapter 335. Han Yi has already stopped laughing, standing in front of the maid in all seriousness. Well, now that the dark cloud spirit flower has been proven, it's time for us to calculate the issue of compensation. The maid widened her eyes and opened her black mouth, revealing a horrified and despairing expression. Han Yi smiles even more gently. Don't worry, we won't make things difficult for you, just do as you said just now. Either he took out a dark cloud spirit flower, or he had to pay 10 million gold coins. Oh, right, don't forget the punishment of 100 lashes. Miss, may I ask if what I said is correct? The maid's body was on the verge of collapsing. If one could still see the color of her skin at this time, one would probably see a pale face. No. Forgive me, Aya, I can't afford it. Han Yi lets out a regretful sigh. He clapped his hands together and said gently, but don't worry. Even if you can't afford it, we won't force you. As you said, it's very simple. If I don't have enough money, I'll just sell you to the 10,000 cave. It's just that your appearance. Han Yi looks her up and down at her mushy appearance. Oh, the flesh business is no good, but it's still pretty good to be a slave in the beast-fighting Colosseum. After all, you also have an earth stage cultivation. Presumably, you'll be able to earn a lot of money from each match. There's still a long way to go. If he worked for a few decades, there would come a day when he would be able to pay off his debt of 10 million gold coins. Don't you think so? The maidservant couldn't hold on any longer when she heard this, and her eyes rolled back as she fainted. In the breeze, Muyan sits next to the dark cloud spirit flower. As the sun set in the west, the dark cloud spirit flower became more and more translucent. Its beauty was out of this world. But Mu Yang also knows that its short life has come to an end. In at most an hour, these flowers would completely wither and bear a pitch-black seed. Just like the two crystals left in her space, they had no vitality. Mu Yang sighs softly. In the end, she still reaches out and touches the sparkling and translucent petals, as well as the pink stamen in the center of the petals. The flowers swayed gently, as if expressing their affection and closeness to her. It also seemed to be telling him that he was fast. Their lives were like mayflies, short and helpless, but their short 7 days of life were more gorgeous than all the summer flowers in the world. Even if it was only 7 days, it was enough. Mu Yang gently plucks off the stamens in the center and carefully puts them into the jade box. The last ray of sunlight sank into the western sky, and the little flower withered completely, its life gone. Muyan raises her hand and gently waves it, collecting the dried leaves and seeds of the dark cloud spirit flower into her space. Then he gets up and hands the jade box to Di Mingju. These few hours, she quietly looked at the dark cloud spirit flower, unwilling to pick it. Di Mingju accompanies her at her side, not saying a word. Looking at this point, Mu Yang did not intend to argue with this man. After all, the seed of the dark cloud spirit flower was provided by Di Mingju. The dark cloud spirit flower was able to bloom because of Di Mingju. In the end, she doesn't have the qualifications to ask who Di Mingju wants to give the stamen of the dark cloud spirit flower to. You wanted the stamen of the dark cloud spirit flower, so we're even, right? Mu Yang said lightly. Di Mingju takes the jade box and immediately hands it over to Han Yi. Chapter 336. Just a moment ago, Mu Yang thought that she had thought things through. Hearing this, the displeasure in his heart immediately turned into a raging fire. This bastard really wanted to give away the stamen of the dark cloud spirit flower that he had worked so hard to grow. He really wanted to snatch back the jade box that he had just handed over. However, Han Yi doesn't give her the slightest chance. He takes the jade box, and without even saying a word, he turns into light and disappears. From the looks of it, he was really anxious. Muyan's eyes are heavy. Without saying anything more, she turns around and leaves. She didn't care who this man was going to give the dark cloud spirit flower to, she just wanted to see her baby. However, he had only taken 2 steps. Di Mingju's figure suddenly appears, blocking in front of her. Mu Yang narrows her eyes, her expression exceptionally unkind. What is Junshong doing? You wanted me to help you take care of your flowers, and I did. I also picked the stamen that you wanted to give to your little lover. Now that I want to leave, could it be that Junshong still won't allow it? Di Mingju's good-looking sword-like eyebrows wrinkle. There's a trace of doubt in the depths of his eyes. What little lover? He. Act. Keep pretending. Di Mingju stares blankly for a moment, then suddenly comes to a realization. You mean Shalanling? How could she be? Suddenly, his voice paused. A trace of a smile appears in his eyes. He leans closer to Muyan and whispers in her ear, Muyan, hearing your tone, Ben Jun will think that you are jealous. Jealous my ass. Mu Yang's face flushed red and she almost roared out loud. Looking at the man's smiling eyes, she felt even more annoyed when she saw her own angry look in his icy blue eyes. Pushing the man's face away, Mu Yang coldly says, It's your business how you like to fantasize, I'm not interested. Right now, I just want to leave. Juanshang Daren wouldn't go back on his words, right? Di Mingju clasps her wrist and forcibly pulls her to his side. Wait 1 more day. After 1 day, I'll definitely let you see Xiao Bao. Why should I wait another day? Mu Yang coldly says, Don't forget what you promised. As long as I grow the dark cloud spirit flower, you'll let me go. Before she could finish her sentence, the world in front of her started spinning. Di Mingju lifts her up again, hanging her on his shoulder. It was as if he was carrying a sack. Di Mingju. Muyan almost roars, You're going back on your word, you're shameless. The man stretched out his hand and gently patted her perky butt. His ears were suspiciously red. The voice that came out was still as cold as ever. No matter what you say, I won't let you leave before tomorrow night. I don't want to be sold to Wn Renku, and I don't want to be whipped 100 times. Please help me plead with the noble. The maids who were scorched from head to toe knelt in front of Shalanling, crying bitterly as they begged. Opposite the maid sat a beautiful and refined woman dressed in white. Hearing the maid's pleading cry, the woman's eyebrows furrowed slightly. Her cold and otherworldly face immediately had a hint of gentleness and beauty, as if she was being held in her hands. She was indescribably delicate and lovely. Qing what exactly happened? I told you to go pick the stamen of the dark cloud spirit flower. How did you end up like this? Chapter 337. This servant couldn't stand it, so I tried to reason with her, but I didn't expect that I would end up like this. She told him what had happened in the herb garden with a lot of embellishments. She focuses on how Muyan coveted the dark cloud spirit flower, and after discovering that it was given to Shalanling, she deliberately destroyed it and framed her. After Di Mingju appeared, how she seduced Di Mingju. The more Shalanling listens, the tighter her brows knit together. Her calm and tranquil eyes also slightly sink. Do you know where that person came from? The maid sees the displeasure in Shalanling's eyes, and a flash of happiness appears on her face. She immediately says, replying to Miss, that woman is called Muyan, and she's now a famous doctor in Tianyuan City. I heard that she also passed the senior doctor's exam of Xian Medical Pavilion. Ah! Xian Medical Pavilion? Shalanling lets out a disdainful sneer, clearly not putting Xian Medical Pavilion in her eyes at all. The maid still wants to say more, but Han Yi has already rushed over like a gust of wind. Miss Sha. Han Yi slightly gasps for breath as he takes out the jade box. He goes straight to the point. This is the stamen of the dark cloud spirit flower. Junshong wants it, please complete it as soon as possible. Shalanling takes the jade box, her fingers gently caressing the top. A man's incomparably handsome face seems to appear before her eyes. A slight heat rises on her cheeks. Why didn't Di Jun himself come? She murmurs softly, and about today's matter, I heard from Qing oh, if Miss Sha didn't mention it, I would have forgotten. Han Yi seems to have just discovered the maid's existence, curling his lips up into a sneer. Why are you still here? Didn't you promise to go to the Ghost City to receive 100 lashes, and then go to the beast-fighting Colosseum to raise money to pay off the debt? Hearing Han Yi's words, the maid's eyes fill with fear. She looks at Shi Lanling with a pleading look. Miss. Shi Lanling's brows slightly wrinkle. Guard Han, there might be some misunderstanding in today's matter. Even if Qing was really framed and accidentally killed the Dark Cloud Spirit Flower, there's no need to be so overbearing, right? After all, Qing is my personal maid. I don't know if Guard Han can allow me to see Di Jun, and ask him to make an exception. There's no need to make an exception. Han Yi says with a smile that isn't a smile, since Miss Shi is pleading for leniency, it's fine not to send that person to WN Ren Ku. Hearing this, the maidservant's face revealed an ecstatic expression. Shi Lanling also smiled with satisfaction, her face carrying a touch of pride and joy. Who knew that Han Yi's next sentence would make her so angry that she almost drops the jade box on the ground? As long as Miss Lan is willing to compensate my family's Jun with millions of gold coins, your maid naturally wouldn't have to go to WN Ren Ku. Of course, the punishment of 100 lashes is unavoidable. Shi Lanling clenched her teeth. Guard Han, do you think the Emperor knows that you are acting on your own? Han Yi has an indifferent look on his face. If Miss Shi feels that it is necessary, you are welcome to complain to my Jun Shong at any time. As he spoke, he clapped his hands. Immediately, someone rushed in and dragged the screaming maid out. 100 lashes, in addition to being sent to the 10,000 cave, sent to the beast fighting arena, to spend the rest of his life fighting with beasts and humans until his death. Piak. Shi Lanling heavily slammed the jade box in her hand onto the table, her face alternating between green and purple. But in the end, she still managed to endure it. Han Yi once again put on a smiling and gentle appearance. Miss Shi, 3 stamens of the Dark Cloud Spirit Flower, it wouldn't be a problem to refine at least 9 orifices golden dan, right? Chapter 338. Refining a golden elixir of 9 orifices with 3 Dark Cloud Spirit Flowers was already a very high success rate. Shi Lanling arrogantly raised her chin. Of course, there's no problem. With my, Shi Lanling's, alchemy skills, the Emperor Lord doesn't need to worry at all. Once the elixir is refined, Lanling will personally deliver the elixir to the Emperor. Others couldn't even refine a golden pill of 9 orifices with 3 Dark Cloud Spirit Flowers. But she insisted on making 2 or 3 pills. At that time, she would definitely make that person look at her in a different light. She would definitely let that person know that she was the best. Shi Lanling pressed her hand on the jade box, her eyes full of expectation, desire, and determination. She didn't even hear Han Yi's words. There's no need, Jun Shong doesn't see outsiders. He just immersed himself in his own world. From the first moment she laid eyes on Di Mingju, Shi Lanling has allowed her heart to sink completely into this man. Because she knows that in the Yenwu continent, there will never be another man like this person, handsome, powerful, and aloof. Only a man like this was worthy of her, Shi Lanling. With a creak, the door was pushed open. Ying Mai carefully carried the dishes into the house. However, the room was quiet and the light was dim. There were no melodious zither sounds, no warm candlelight, and no refreshing fragrance. What made Ying Mai uneasy was that she could smell a faint smell of blood in the air. He put down the tray, walked around the screen, and entered the room. Ying Mai saw a figure moving slowly on the bed and called out softly, "Miss Jun, it's time to eat. You haven't even had breakfast." Before he finished speaking, Ying Mai's expression suddenly changed. On the bed not far away, a young girl in pajamas was leaning against the headboard. His face was pale, and his head was slightly drooping. He was so weak that he looked like he could fall off the bed at any time. What was even more frightening was that her pale lips and snow-white clothes were stained with captivating red blood. "Miss Jun." Ying Mai turns pale with fright and rushes over to help Muyan, whose life or death is unknown. She pinched her slender, jade-like wrist with her fingers and slowly injected spiritual energy into it. It had been a long time since Ying Mai had been so afraid. His hands were ice-cold and his body was trembling slightly. He was afraid that something might happen to Mu Yang. However, as the spiritual power gushed out, She felt that her eyelids were getting heavier and her consciousness was getting more and more blurry. His body began to sway uncontrollably. Yingmai struggled to open her eyes, but she couldn't control her body. She suddenly realized something. Raising her eyes with difficulty, she saw the young girl who was on the verge of death a moment ago. Her long eyelashes fluttered and her eyes shone with a crafty light. The corners of her lips curled up, revealing a charming smile at her. Yingmai's first reaction was, "Fortunately, Miss Jun is fine." Unable to hold on any longer, he fainted. Looking at the young man who has fallen asleep in her arms, Mu Yang cupped her hands guiltily towards her. "I'm sorry, Yingmai, I'll borrow your identity first. When I see my baby, I will definitely come back to treat your illness and maintain your figure." Mu Yang's speed is very fast, and she directly changes clothes with Yingmai. In the mirror, the black-clothed youth's face couldn't be seen clearly under the shadow, but the cold temperament around him was exactly the same as Yingmai. He believes that as long as he doesn't look closely, even Han Yi, who is most familiar with Yingmai, wouldn't be able to recognize him. Chapter 339. She quietly leaves the room. As she passes by the food on the table, Muyan swallows her saliva, but in the end, she still restrains herself. In order to act more realistically, she didn't even eat breakfast. She's really hungry now. But in order to see her dear Xiao Bao, what's a little hunger? Today is a rainy day, and the entire courtyard is dark and gloomy. Muyan pretends to be a Yingmai, effortlessly passing through the guards. Just as she's about to approach the courtyard gate, she sees a tall figure coming towards her. That cold and powerful aura, even from dozens of meters away, can't be ignored at all. Muyan's pupils contract, and she inwardly says that it's not good. How could she be so unlucky? She managed to deal with the Yingmai with great difficulty, but she actually bumps into this guy. However, there are no obstacles between the two of them. If she tries to hide or pretend not to see it now, it would only make things worse. Muyan takes a deep breath, and as Di Mingju slowly approaches imitating the Yingmai, she slightly bows, and deliberately lowers her voice. "Jun Shong." Di Mingju's expression is indifferent. "Where's Muyan?" Muyan's heart tightens, and she strives to make her tone sound as indifferent as the Yingmai, replying to Jun Shong, "Miss Muyan is currently resting." Di Mingju's brows slightly wrinkle, and a trace of worry flits across his eyes. He no longer pays attention to the Yingmai in front of him, and directly brushes past her, heading towards Muyan's room. The two brush past each other, and Muyan lets out a long sigh of relief. Then, just as she's about to take a step, the man who has already brushed past her abruptly stops and turns around. "Wait a minute." Muyan's heart suddenly jumps up to her throat. "Jun Shong, is there anything else?" She lowers her head, not daring to look up. So she doesn't see the man slightly narrowing his eyes not far from her. A pair of eyes unblinkingly falls on her, and then a dark light flashes. What did Muyan do today? Nothing, nothing. Miss Jun has been resting today. Oh, is that so? Yes. Muyan grits her teeth. "Jun Shong, if there's nothing else, this subordinate will take her leave first." There's a moment of silence from the other side. Just as Muyan is about to break into a run, the man's deep voice slowly speaks. "Go prepare, Ben Jun wants to take a bath." What the hell? Mu Yang cursed in her heart, wishing that she could chop the man in front of her into 8 pieces. Bathing was one thing, but he actually needed someone to serve him? Did this man know that Yingmai was a woman? He asked a woman to help him bathe. This shameless hooligan. Pervert. However, ridicule is ridicule. Muyan knows that in front of Di Mingju, even if she exerts all of her skills, she still wouldn't be able to escape. Rather than being exposed now and being caught again, it would be better for him to go back. She might as well go to the hot spring with this man. Take a bath. I need to take off my clothes, right? You need to take off your pants, right? When the time comes, Di Mingju will strip naked and break into a run, conveniently taking his clothes along the way. Could it be that he would chase after her naked? Thinking of this wonderful idea, Muyan's state of mind calms down quite a bit. Even when Di Mingju opened his mouth to let her undress. She could even brace herself and do it. Hehe, isn't it just undressing? It's not the first time anyway. The first time they were strangers, the second time they were friends, the third and fourth time they were easy to get along with your sister. Di Mingju, this bastard, does he usually let Yingmai undress him when he takes a bath? Chapter 340. Robes, shirts, shoes, and shoes were taken off one by one. Even if Muyan doesn't dare to raise her head, she can still feel the man's sexy abs and waistline in front of her. There was also the man's unique scent. Because they were so close, it kept drilling into her nose, making her head unconsciously dizzy. When there's only a pair of underwear left, Muyan's hand stops. However, Di Mingju still stands in front of her, not budging an inch. Then, she heard the man's deep and husky voice. Continue. What? Mu Yang almost raised her head and stared at him in shock. But Di Mingju says as if it's a matter of course, Ben Jun wants to take a bath. Don't tell me you want Ben Jun to take a bath wearing pants. Steam rose from the hot spring, blurring the faces of the two people. Therefore, even though Di Mingju's body is almost completely stripped right now, she can't see it as clearly as when she was drawing that day. But even if she couldn't see clearly, having her strip off every single one of his clothes was too. Mu Yang inwardly curses Di Mingju, this pervert, countless times. But in the end, the situation was stronger than the person. Moreover, wouldn't it be more convenient for her to escape if she stripped this man naked? Thinking of this, Mu Yang grits her teeth. She grabbed the waist of the man's trousers and pulled it all the way down. During the process, the back of her hand accidentally touched the hot spring. She was so scared that she almost kicked the man into the hot spring pool. Amidst the rising steam, Mu Yang can still see the man's straight and slender legs. Even if it was just a shadow, this man's body was still so seductive and perfect. Now, can I? Jun Shong. The last two words are squeezed out by Mu Yang's teeth. She swore that if this pervert dared to cause any more trouble, she would definitely kick him into the pond. Di Mingju lowers his head and looks at the young girl in front of him. The corner of his mouth hooks up into a shallow smile as he looks at the angry Mu Yang. This little woman, did she think he couldn't recognize her? In fact, her acting was very good. If it were someone else, he might not have been able to tell that it wasn't Yingmai. However, the person pretending to be a shadow demon is Jun Muyan. In this world, he, Di Mingju, might not be able to recognize anyone, but he would never be unable to recognize Jun Muyan. Even if it was a wisp of aura or a tiny movement, he seemed to be familiar with it to the bone. Originally, he knew that Muyan wanted to escape, and his heart was still full of anger. At this moment, when he saw the young girl's indignant expression, all of this turned into gentleness and love. Usually, Muyan is always lazy and calm, as if she doesn't care about anything. What Di Mingju wants to see the most is for her to reveal a different attitude of a daughter because of him. The atmosphere in the hot spring was especially strange because of the long silence between the two. Mu Yang's entire body stiffens, her heart pounding like a drum. Just as she was about to lose it, the man suddenly turned around and slowly walked into the hot spring. The milky white water and the steaming mist cover the man's body, allowing Muyan to heave a long sigh of relief. Now, she could finally leave. However, just as he took a step forward, she hears Di Mingju's magnetic voice slowly ring out with a bit of laziness and lust, "Come here." Muyan's footsteps stiffen, her hands clenching into fists. What does this pervert want to do now? She really wanted to leave, but the problem was that the exit was at the other end of the hot spring pool. She could not guarantee that she would be able to use her qinggong to escape. Will Di Mingju drag him into the pond midway? Chapter 341. Come here and scrub my back. The man's voice became hoarse and lazy, like a feather that drilled into one's heart. Mu Yang couldn't help but look up, her blood almost rushing to her nose. This scene was too against the rules. She saw the man lazily lying on the edge of the pool. Her long, jet-black hair was tucked in front of her chest, vaguely covering the spot on her chest. What was revealed, however, was her honey-colored skin and her sexy back that was submerged in the water. Mu Yang swallows her saliva and can't help but look at the man's face. Di Mingju's complexion has always been extremely beautiful. Sword-like eyebrows, starry eyes, a straight nose, and thin lips. Not a single inch of his facial features was imperfect. When put together, he was even more handsome than a mortal. But usually, the aura around him was indescribably cold and distant. He was so high up that no one dared to get close to him and blaspheme him. But at this moment, Di Mingju has shed all of his indifference, and on the contrary, has added a trace of evil charm that can make people's hearts tremble. It was a person, no matter men or women. Seeing this scene, no one would be able to control themselves. Di Mingju suddenly lifts his eyes, the corner of his lips slightly hooking up. What are you still staring at? Aren't you going to help me wipe my back? Mu Yang abruptly comes back to herself. That little bit of charm and reverie just now instantly turned into gnashing her teeth. So be it. Hopefully, this man can take it. Mu Yang casually picks up a towel from the side, wets it, and wipes it on Di Mingju's back. Profound energy quietly circulated, and the ordinary towel even emitted a ka sound of the thread breaking. With this kind of strength, even if it was used to rub a piece of granite, it would be able to rub it full of holes. But what makes Mu Yang dumbfounded is no matter how much strength she uses, Di Mingju's back is still smooth and sexy. Not even the slightest trace was left behind. Fuck. Was he still human? What was this bastard's skin made of? Out of curiosity, Mu Yang couldn't help but reach out and scratch the smooth and warm skin with her fingers. In a split second, Di Mingju's body shudders uncontrollably. Before Mu Yang could react, she only feels that the sky and earth are spinning. He was pulled over by a strong force. Thump. A large amount of warm water surged over and covered her head and face. Cough, cough, cough. Mu Yang comes out of the water with great difficulty, only to meet the man's scarlet eyes. The previously icy blue color had completely transformed into flames of desire at this moment. Mu Yang, do you know when a woman will grab a man's back like this? Mu Yang is startled. She is a little flustered by the flames in the man's eyes. She wants to escape. However, as soon as she moved, the man's lips fell on her. He held her tightly in his arms, as if he couldn't wait to swallow her whole. A hoarse voice, with a strong sense of expectation, intermittently rings in her ears, only, when we are in the bridal chamber. Muyan, do you want to try it now? Muyan. 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 Yang Yang, wait a minute. Muyan abruptly comes back to her senses from her confusion. She bends her knee and viciously knocks it. Di Mingju snorts, and has no choice but to let go of the person. No matter how high his cultivation is, no matter how impregnable he is, he still wouldn't be able to resist that kind of pain. Cough, cough. Mu Yang glares at him indignantly, cursing as she retreats towards the edge of the pool. So you really knew. Chapter 342. Muyan stares blankly, a strange sweetness inexplicably welling up in her heart. Di Mingju's words simply tell her that, to him, she's different, and no one can compare to her. Wait a minute. Now's not the time to be secretly happy about these inexplicable things. The most important thing right now is to escape from here, to see her baby. Muyan leaps and leaves the hot spring pool. Standing on the shore, she looks at Di Mingju, whose face is still somewhat distorted from the pain just now. She can't help but take pleasure in his misfortune, curling up the corners of her lips. Jun Shong, you can continue to take a good bath here, I'll go first. Saying that, his figure flashes, and as fast as lightning, he heads out the door. This hot spring pool is at the southernmost part of the courtyard, separated from the outside world by a wooden door. Muyan has just opened the wooden door, about to escape without a trace. She suddenly feels something tighten around her waist, and her whole body flies out. Before she could clearly see what's wrapped around her waist, she sees a silver whip flash in front of her, and the wooden door that was just opened is slammed shut with a bang. And Muyan's body falls straight down in midair. Below her is the hot spring pool. However, the scene of her falling into the water doesn't appear as she expected. Instead, she's being pulled into a blazing embrace. The man's low, hoarse, and angry voice rings in her ears. Dressed like this, Where do you think you're going? At this moment, although Muyan is wearing clothes, she's completely drenched, revealing the curves of her body. Her hair bun was also disheveled from the action just now, and her long, messy hair drapes behind her, making her look even more enchanting and charming, like the most beautiful goblin coming out of the water. If Muyan leaves this courtyard like this, and is seen by the men outside, as soon as Defying thinks of such a scene, he can't wait to dig out the eyes of all the men in his imagination. You don't want to stay with me that much? Why is it that from the moment they've met, this woman has always tried every possible way to escape from his side? Muyan feels that she's firmly imprisoned in the man's embrace. Through the thin, drenched clothes, she can even feel the man's skin's blazing heat and explosive power. She struggles to leave, but she's imprisoned even tighter. She can only brace herself and say, Defying, you said that as long as I raised the dark cloud spirit flower, you'd let me go. We met by chance, why do you have to? Defying snorts coldly. Strangers meeting by chance can also turn into mutual promises of life and death. You are destined to be my wife. Muyan grits her teeth. Who is your wife? Don't be so shameless. When did I say I wanted to marry you? You won't marry me. Not marrying. Defying's expression is indifferent. Oh, then Ben-jun can also marry into your family. Muyan, what the fuck? Defying, do you know what you're saying? Jun Shongdaran, do you still want your face? Muyan takes a deep breath, then another deep breath. Defying, what do you see in me? With your qualifications, what kind of woman can't you have? Why do you have to pester me, a married man with a child? Didn't you give your dark cloud spirit flower to that Shishenzi? You're even willing to give her the dark cloud spirit flower, so Shalanling's position in your heart isn't low. Isn't it better for you to find her and tie the knot? When he hears Muyan mention her ex-husband again, Defying's heart sinks to the bottom of a valley. The anticipation in his eyes completely turns into pain and jealousy. However, the more he listens, the more the gloominess between his brows dissipates. Chapter 343. Muyan. Defying sticks close to her ear from behind, slowly saying, You still say that you're not jealous? You did everything you could to leave this place. Besides missing Xiaobao, was it also because you were angry that I gave the dark cloud spirit flower to Shalanling? When he first met Muyan, our Jun Shongdaran was indeed a virgin brother without any experience in love. But ever since he was determined to chase after Muyan and obtain her heart, Defying had Han Yi look for all kinds of stories and plays, just to learn a little bit how to make Muyan happy, how to move her heart, how to make her fall in love with him. Of course, these shameful things, Jun Shongdaran will absolutely not say it out loud. But the effect of this was also remarkable. From the very beginning, when the two people met, Defying was inexperienced, being played in circles by Muyan. By now, Muyan was already unable to withstand this man's endless methods. You're thinking too much. Why should I be jealous of you? Let go. On the contrary, Defying tightens his grip, his voice becoming increasingly hoarse. I won't let go. I won't let you go for the rest of my life. Bang. Water splashed everywhere. Muyan presses her hand on the man, taking advantage of Defying's momentary absent-mindedness. He soared into the air. However, before she could fly ashore, his ankle was grabbed and forcefully pulled back. This time, Muyan is pressed to the edge of the pool. He raised his hands above his head. Defying looks down at her, his eyes slightly red. The water droplets on her hair drip down, flowing onto Muyan's body and face. Muyan is inexplicably flustered when she's being stared at by those blazing eyes. Her blood is boiling and her mouth is parched. However, before the two of them could speak or move, the hot springs door was suddenly slammed open. Jun Shong, this subordinate has already given the dark cloud spirit flower to Shalanling, she guarantees. Han Yi's voice comes to an abrupt halt. Facing Defying's murderous gaze, he quivered and shivered. At this very moment, Han Yi really wants to slap himself to death. Who asked him to push open the door? Who asked him to report the progress of alchemy with his cheap mouth, letting him have nothing better to do than to disturb Jun Shong and Miss Muyan? I I didn't see anything, I didn't say anything. Jun Shong, spare my life. Woo 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 tilde tilde. With a bang, Han Yi closes the door once again. Like his fleeing, he slips away without a trace. Muyan, who has already sobered up, hooks up the corners of her lips. Doesn't Jun Shong Daran want to know what your soulmate, Shixianzi, has promised you? I don't want to. Di Ming Ju clenches his teeth and spits out 2 words. The corners of Mu Yang's lips curve deeper, but I really want to know. Di Ming Ju lowers his head and gently bites her lips. You'll know soon enough. Also, I don't have any female confidants, only you, my future wife. Ooh. Mu Yang ruthlessly kicked him. This bastard was born in the year of the dog. It actually bit him. If you move again, I won't be able to hold myself back, and I'll make you my wife right now. A scorching breath breathes into Mu Yang's ears, as if carrying an infinite sigh and longing. Mu Yang's movements stiffen. In the end, Di Ming Ju doesn't move again. Instead, he carried her and flew to the edge of the hot spring. Water splashed everywhere and mist lingered. When the water falls back to the ground, Di Ming Ju has already put on his clothes. Mu Yang raises her eyebrows. Storage space? She had already guessed that Di Ming Ju should have a storage space, otherwise he wouldn't often take things out of thin air. But she has never felt it so directly like this time. Chapter 344. Di Ming Ju doesn't answer her, but grabs her hand and flattens it. A moment later, a brownish-red ring lies on Mu Yang's palm. The man's voice carried a hint of disdain. The storage rings on this continent are too crude and have no value. If you like it, it doesn't matter if you play with it. Mu Yang infused her internal force to feel it, and her head suddenly felt a little dizzy. In her previous life, Gong Qianxue also had a storage ring. However, the storage space was only dozens of square meters in size. Gong Qianxue treasured it like it was something. Its status could even be equal to that of Gong Qianxue's contracted holy beast. But the space in her hand is no less than several hundred square meters. Moreover, when internal force is injected, the space is very stable. Even the herbs and drafts inside can be kept fresh. But Di Ming Ju has the attitude of I despise this shabby thing. Giving it away would simply throw Ben Jun's face. Mu Yang really didn't know what to say. Cough. Mu Yang returns the storage ring. I also have a storage space, I don't need this. Take it back. In fact, she always takes the Tianmo Qin in and out of thin air, so everyone in the courtyard already knows that she has space. He just didn't expect it to be such a special space. Di Ming Ju doesn't take the storage ring back. Instead, he strings it on a chain and hangs it around Mu Yan's neck. In the future, Ben Jun will give you a better one. But it's good for you to carry it now. At the very least, it can help you cover up a little. Mu Yan stares blankly. She raises her head to meet the man's eyes that are as deep as the sea, and her heart trembles. Why does she always feel that Di Ming Ju seems to know something? He shouldn't be able to guess the identity of the Tianmo Qin and her Shun musician, right? After all, Bailey Yinlu had said that the Shun musicians had already disappeared from this world for thousands of years. In all the continents of the 3 realms, Shun musicians are an unspeakable, taboo existence. At this point, it should be impossible for anyone to know his identity as a Shun musician, right? With lingering fear, Han Yi scrambles out of the hot spring pool. After running for a long distance, he finally stopped, panting heavily. His heart was still filled with doubt and shock. Back then, Jun Shong didn't even allow people to get close to him, let alone taking a bath. Even Elder Chang, who has the closest relationship with Jun Shong. But now, Jun Shong actually pulled Miss Muyan to bathe in the pool. So much so that Jun Shong doesn't even have a single piece of clothing on him. Han Yi touches his nose, feeling a little dizzy. If he were to say these words to Little Shadow and the people from the polar domain, their jaws would definitely drop. Oh, right, where's Little Shadow? She remembered that he seemed to have said that he was going to deliver a meal to Miss Muyan, but he never came back. Could it be that he had been waiting for someone in Miss Muyan's room? Thinking of this, Han Yi promptly goes to Mu Yang's room. With Little Shadow's stubborn temper, if he doesn't see Miss Muyan return, he might keep waiting. just as he reaches the door of Muyen's room and is about to enter. The door was opened from the inside with a bang. A tall and slender woman in a long dress with her hair draped loosely over her shoulders rushed out. As soon as Han Yi sees this woman, he only feels an explosion in his head. His heart seemed to have been hit by something. It was beating so fast that it felt like it was about to jump out of his mouth. Chapter 345. Her figure was not petite like other women, but rather tall and slender. But those straight legs, those undulating and round chest lines, all made her full of seductive charm. Han Yi couldn't help but open his mouth, but his tongue and mouth are parched, unable to say a word. On the contrary, when this beauty sees him, she immediately reveals a familiar and anxious expression. Han Yi, Miss Jun has left. Han Yi. This beauty called him Han Yi? And why did the voice sound so familiar? It was cold and had a youthful feel to it. Wait a minute. Why does this beauty's face look so familiar? You are. Little Shadow. She hears something wrong in Han Yi's tone. Yingmai seemed to be stunned, then looked down at her body. The first thing that entered his eyes was the undulating curves of her chest and the skirt that belonged to a woman. There was also her long hair, which danced in the wind behind her. Yingmai's eyes widened. She was actually wearing women's clothing, and it was even seen by Han Yi. Why was she wearing women's clothing? Right, it's Miss Jun. When Miss Jun left, they changed clothes. Little Shadow, you can't be a woman, right? Han Yi's eyes stare straight at Yingmai. He swallows, and swallows again. Yingmai's personality had always been cold, and her methods were even more ruthless than a man's. Moreover, there was not the slightest trace of femininity in her movements. Therefore, even though Yingmai is delicate and pretty, even more beautiful than many of the beauties in the polar domain, Han Yi has never doubted that she might be a woman. But the girl in front of him was too beautiful, too tempting. Her cheeks were as white as snow. Her dress fluttered gracefully in the wind. Saying that Yingmai was a girl really didn't feel the slightest bit strange. When Yingmai heard this, she was shocked. A hint of panic flashed in her eyes, and she quickly disappeared. Her expression was cold, and her eyes were piercingly cold. She said in a low voice, "Don't blame me for being impolite if you speak nonsense again." As he spoke, he released his ice-cold killing intent. Han Yi isn't afraid of Yingmai's murderous intent. But looking at her cold face, it was obvious that she was really angry. He quickly put away his emotions and said with a smile, "Little Shadow, don't be angry. I was just joking. But your clothes are." Come to think of it, if he was treated as a woman, he would definitely be angry. Yingmai frowns in annoyance, then his face is dyed with anxiety. "It's Miss June. She changed into my clothes and left. I must go find her immediately, otherwise if Jun Shong finds out, it'll be troublesome." After saying that, he's about to dash out of the cold night. Han Yi promptly reaches out to block her. In the end, no one knew how the two of them moved. Yingmai's chest happens to bump into Han Yi's arm. The soft touch makes Han Yi's whole body stiffen, and his eyes widen. "Get out of the way." Yingmai's pretty face is flushed with anger, and she's about to slap Han Yi with her palm. Wait. Han Yi repeatedly begs for mercy, reaching out to grab Yingmai's slender wrist, urgently saying, "Miss Jun didn't leave, she's with Jun Shong right now. You mustn't disturb him, otherwise. He would definitely die a horrible death like him." "Are you serious?" "It's absolutely true." Han Yi almost swears to the heavens, "I saw it with my own eyes, how could it be fake?" The air is quiet for a moment. "You still won't let go." Yingmai's face is flushed, and she struggles with all her might. Chapter 346. Her wrist was held by this person and she couldn't break free no matter how hard she tried. Han Yi's expression is somewhat absent-minded, his fingers subconsciously gently caressing Yingmai's wrist. He only felt that the skin on that fair and slender wrist was shockingly smooth and soft. How could a man have such snow-white, smooth skin? And the feeling when the shadow phantom bumped into her hand just now, "Han Yi, if you don't let go, I won't be polite." Yingmai flew into a rage out of humiliation. With an angry shout, he slaps his palm towards Han Yi. Han Yi abruptly comes back to his senses, but it's already too late to dodge. His left eye took a solid punch. Ouch! He let out a blood-curdling scream and took 2 steps back. She covered her eyes and complained, "Little Shadow, you're prettier than a girl, but why are you so cruel?" Yingmai hides her hand, which is burning hot from Han Yi's grasp, behind her back. He said coldly, "If you ever compare me to a girl again, I'll make you a real girl." Saying that, his line of sight slightly drifts, passing over Han Yi's lower body. Han Yi immediately feels his balls tighten, his face pale with fright. I was just joking. Little Shadow, you don't have to be so serious. But, you look really good in this. Did Miss Jun change it for you? Miss Jun is really talented. What did she do to your chest? Why does it feel so real? As he says that, Han Yi very curiously reaches out to touch Yingmai's chest. Smack. Yingmai ruthlessly slaps away Han Yi's salty pig hand. The sword in his hand was unsheathed, filled with killing intent. You don't want your hand anymore? After saying that, he paid no more attention to Zhongxian and quickly left. She couldn't maintain her current appearance any longer. Especially in front of Han Yi. Yingmai's figure quickly disappears, leaving Han Yi dumbfounded in his place. He clenched and unclenched his fists. His fingertips and arms could still feel the sensation from earlier. Smooth and soft. Oh no. Han Yi clutches his chest, his expression flustered. What's wrong with him? He knew that it was Little Shadow. He knew that Little Shadow was a boy. But why was it that whenever he thought of Little Shadow's face, he felt as if there was a fire burning in his body? An unfamiliar tide of emotions surged out from his body. It was unstoppable. Lanling's small building, in the alchemy room. Only Shi Lanling sat alone in front of the pill furnace. The surroundings of the pill furnace emitted a faint purple light, and one could faintly see the rising flames inside. If someone saw this pill furnace, they would definitely exclaim. That's because this Zijin Dan furnace is one of the most valuable Dan furnaces in the Yenwu continent. The only thing comparable to her value was probably the golden coiling dragon furnace in the hands of the heavenly road sect's alchemy master, Jian Feng. The profound energy in Shi Lanling's body quickly surged, driving the flames in the purple gold furnace to jump. As the flames burned brighter and brighter, the entire room was filled with the cool fragrance of the dark cloud spirit flower. In the pill furnace, there were also 3 silver-white pills that were slowly taking shape. Shi Lanling's forehead was covered in fine sweat, and her face was deathly pale. However, when he saw the 3 golden elixirs of 9 orifices slowly condensing, he was filled with pride and excitement. According to the ancient records, the dark cloud spirit flower was rare, and the 9 orifices golden pill was difficult to refine. But in Shi Lanling's eyes, it was nothing. She could still refine 3 pills in one go. However, just as Shi Lanling was feeling proud of herself. Chapter 347. Then there's a loud bang. Before Shi Lanling could react, a monstrous wave comes head-on towards her. Her whole body is thrown several meters away, and she heavily hits a table and chair. Miss, what's wrong? The maid outside hears the commotion and rushes in. She is startled to see Shi Lanling lying on the ground, her hair disheveled and her body covered in soot. Miss, what's wrong? What's going on? Shi Lanling pushes away the maid who comes to help her, and rushes to the Dan furnace at lightning speed. She opens the lid, only to find that the elixir that was just about to condense into shape. At this time, 2 of them have already completely broken into black slag. There was only one that was emitting a silver light, and it lay alone in the pill furnace. Shi Lanling's brows tightly knit together, a deep unwillingness flashes through her eyes. 9 orifices golden Dan. This is a 9 orifices golden Dan. She originally thought that if she could refine 3, she might be able to keep one for herself. In this way, she would certainly be able to break through her bottleneck. But now, the stamens of the 3 dark cloud spirit flowers can only refine 1 9 orifices golden Dan. And this 9 orifices golden Dan is the deal she agreed to with Di June. Miss, you're already very amazing. The maid on the side sees Shalanling's depressed and unwilling appearance, and promptly flatters her with a smile. This slave dares to say that in the Yenwu continent, besides Miss, no one can refine the 9 orifices golden dan. Of course, no one can refine the 9 orifices golden dan, because not a single dark cloud spirit flower can be found in the entire Yenwu continent. But listening to the maid Ruiju's words, Shalanling's pale and distressed face still shows a trace of pride. That's right. This is a 9 orifices golden dan, in the entire Yenwu continent. Besides her, who else can refine it? Even Jian Feng of the Heavenly Road sect can't do it. If this news were to spread, then her reputation, Shalanling, would even overshadow Jian Feng's title as the world's #1 alchemist. Ruiju saw that Shalanling's complexion had improved a lot, so she hurriedly continued, "What's more, that noble even took out 3 stalks of dark cloud spirit flower for you, miss. Perhaps this golden elixir of 9 orifices was refined for you. Even if it wasn't for you in the beginning, I believe that as long as you express your desire, no man in this world would be able to refuse you." Shalanling cast a sidelong glance at her maid. "You're the only one who knows how to speak nonsense. How can this be considered as nonsense?" Ruiju makes a big fuss. "Miss, why don't you go and take a look? On this Yenwu continent, in terms of beauty, talent, cultivation, and alchemy, how many people can contend against you? Even if it's Jing Cheng country's illustrious Princess Chenxue, compared to you, she is only the light of a firefly and the splendor of the bright moon. She doesn't have the qualifications to be mentioned in the same breath. It's just that Miss isn't as high profile as that Princess Chenxue. Otherwise, how could Gong Chenxue have the title of Yenwu continent's #1 genius?" Shalanling pursed her lips and revealed a faint and reserved smile. "Go get me some water. I want to wash up and change my clothes." Ruiju hurriedly left. Not long after, Shalanling changed out of her dirty clothes and washed away the dust on her face, revealing her beautiful face. It's just that her complexion still looks pale due to excessive consumption of internal force. Ruiju hands over the brocade box containing the 9 orifices golden dan. "Miss, now that the elixir has been refined, do you need this maid to call Hanyi over to pick it up?" Chapter 348. However, Shalanling shot a cold glance at Ruiju. Ruiju shuddered and immediately reacted, "Look at how silly I am. Miss, of course I have to personally deliver the pill that you refined to the Emperor. Only then will the Emperor be able to sense your intentions." The coldness in Shalanling's eyes faded. The man's incomparably handsome face appeared before her eyes once again, as well as the aura of a monarch descending upon the world. She recalls how all the higher-ups of the ghost city grovel in front of this man and flatter him. And that man, from his expression to his actions, was so cold, so high and mighty. It was as if it was natural for him to be worshipped like this. This was a man who was born to stand at the top, noble and unparalleled. Shalanling only took one look at him, and she was deeply captivated by him. Therefore, after learning that the man wants to find someone to refine the 9 orifices golden pill in the ghost city, Shalanling, who has always been aloof and proud, refuses to lower herself to accept a task. Without saying anything further, she immediately agrees to the deal with Di Mingju. At that time, Hanyi explained the contents of the transaction very clearly. Di Mingju will provide the dark cloud spirit flower, as well as many other resources that are extremely beneficial to Shalanling. The only thing Shalanling needed to do was to use the dark cloud spirit flower to refine at least 1 golden pill of 9 orifices. But in Shalanling's eyes, this kind of action was automatically interpreted as, Di Mingju treats her differently, giving her the dark cloud spirit flower and resources, all because of his affection for her. As for her, she would definitely hold on to this man. "Miss, you're really amazing. Not only do you know alchemy, but you also have good culinary skills. Not only are these medicinal cuisines delicious, but they are also very beneficial to the human body." Ruiju watched Shalanling put the delicacies she had personally prepared into the lunchbox and immediately spared no effort in praising her. "If any man marries you in the future, it would be a great fortune." Shalanling glanced at her. "Shut up." Ruiju giggled and said, "In all honesty, I'm telling the truth. Which woman in the entire Yenwu continent could compare to you? This servant used to think that no man in the world was worthy of you. Misfortunately, the emperor appeared. I'm not good with words, so I don't know what to say. However, when you stand together with the emperor, you look like a perfect match made in heaven. In this world, only the emperor is worthy of Miss. Originally, Shilanling's most capable maid was Qing. Although Rui Zhu wanted to curry favor with Shilanling, she couldn't find an opportunity. Now that Qing was finally sent to the 10,000 humans cave, Rui Zhu was so happy that she almost went crazy. At this moment, he naturally tried his best to flatter Shilanling, hoping to become her confidant. Stop right there. No one is allowed to enter the Ghost City's forbidden area without Di Jun's order. Outside the courtyard, two men dressed in Ghost City's attire step forward and block Shilanling and Rui Zhu's path. This courtyard is the one that Di Mingju and Muyan are currently living in. On the plaque above the courtyard's entrance, the words Emperor Garden were written in clerical script. How dare you? Your dog eyes are blind. Rui Zhu immediately steps forward and arrogantly scolds the two guards. Can't you see clearly who our family's miss is? You actually dare to block our family's Mrs. Wei. I think you don't want to mingle in the Ghost City anymore. Hearing that, the guards stare blankly at Shilanling. After seeing her face clearly, they immediately reveal an astonished expression. Shixianzi. Chapter 349. In the entire Yenwu continent, there are only two people who can do alchemy. In the Ghost City, it is naturally regarded as a supreme existence like a treasure. It can be said that among the Ghost City's higher-ups, there is no one who doesn't know of Shilanling. The guards inside the Emperor Garden were all Di Mingju's trusted aides. However, the guards around the Emperor Garden's periphery were borrowed from the Ghost City. Therefore, after Rui Zhu yelled, the guard immediately recognized Shilanling's identity. Seeing the change in their attitudes, Rui Zhu revealed a smug expression. What are you waiting for? Since you've recognized my young Miss's identity, why aren't you moving out of the way? You will suffer for delaying my young Miss's important matters. The guard is a little hesitant. But Juanshang, Rui Zhu was about to get angry, but Shilanling took a step forward and said in a gentle but distant voice, You don't have to be nervous. I came here this time to deliver pills to the Emperor. If you're worried, you can go in and report to the Emperor. The guard did not have time to reply. Rui Zhu furrowed her brows and angrily cursed, You blind thing, do you know what pill my young miss is holding in her hand? That's the Yenwu continent's one and only 9 orifices golden dan. My family's miss has just refined it. It's precisely because I know that your majesty urgently needs this golden elixir of 9 orifices that I specially brought it here for your majesty. If the sovereign lord's matter is delayed because of you, the golden core will be delivered too late. Let's see how you'll face the wrath of the celestial emperor. Rui Zhu's words made the already hesitant guards even more fearful and fearful. In addition, because of the whispers of the maids in the courtyard, many people know that Di Mingju has specially invited Shixianzi from the Ghost City. He even sent the newly grown dark cloud spirit flower to Shixianzi to refine pills. Almost all of the maids and guards in the Emperor Garden believed that the Emperor treated Fairy Sure in a special way. If they didn't let him in now and incurred the displeasure of the monarch, none of them could bear the consequences. Thinking up to here, the guard clenched his teeth and bowed to make way. Shixianzi, please come inside. I believe that Jun Shong will definitely be very happy to see you. Early in the morning, in the courtyard, Muyan is dressed in a simple yet elegant blue dress. She doesn't put on any makeup as she lazily walks out of her room. Miss Jun. Yingmai sees her and immediately steps forward. Jun Shong invites you to have breakfast. Muyan narrows her eyes, slowly saying, If I remember correctly, Di Mingju promised me that he would let me go today. Ahem. Yingmai blushed and said, Jun Shong said that you will see the young master this afternoon. Now, please go and have a meal. Jun Shong has been waiting for a long time. There was still half a day before she could go back to see her baby. Mu Yang curled her lips unhappily. She was in a very bad mood. It wasn't just because that bastard went back on his word, causing her to be unable to see Xiaobao for so long. It was also because the fat rabbit, who was originally lying in the space, suddenly sprang out. Before she could react, it disappeared without a trace. Although he didn't plan to stir-fry the rabbit meat now, it was still Xiaobao's spirit pet. He didn't know if Xiaobao would be sad to lose it just like that. Just as he was feeling vexed, he suddenly heard a loud shout behind him. "Hey! The two in front, wait up! Did you hear that? I'm talking to you too." Muyan and Ying Mai have never been people who like to meddle in other people's business. Chapter 350. This infuriates Rui Zhu, who was shouting. After she and Shilanling entered the Emperor Garden, they found that the Emperor Garden was very large, divided into two courtyards. Although the guards pointed them in the right direction, they still got lost in the courtyard. Unfortunately, this inner courtyard was empty, not even a shadow. Finally seeing Muyan and Ying Mai, Rui Zhu naturally called out to them. Who would have thought that these two insignificant servants would actually not put her and the miss in their eyes at all? Rui Zhu rushed to Muyan and Ying Mai in 2 or 3 steps, angrily rebuking, "Are you deaf? My miss told you to stop, didn't you hear?" Muyan raises her eyebrows, "Are you calling us?" As soon as Rui Zhu saw Muyan's face, she was taken aback and couldn't even speak for a moment. Because the girl in front of her is really too beautiful. Especially that snow-white skin, and that pair of charming peach blossom eyes that don't smile. They're so beautiful that people can't take their eyes off her. That appearance is even more outstanding than her misses. Who is this person? Why is she in the Emperor Garden? Seeing that she doesn't answer, Muyan is about to leave. Rui Zhu suddenly reacted and immediately shouted, "You're the servants of this courtyard, right? Quick, take my miss to see Dijun." Muyan is wearing plain clothes today, and Ying Mai is wearing the most common guard uniform. Therefore, Rui Zhu immediately recognized them as maids and guards. As they spoke, Shilanling also slowly walked forward. Her clothes were the same as the plain dress. But the fabric of her clothes and the accessories on her body, which one of them isn't worth 1,000 pieces of gold? As she walked, the skirt of her dress fluttered, making her look elegant and otherworldly. Normally, in the Ghost City, as long as Shilanling appears like this, everyone present, whether men or women, would be overwhelmed by her elegant demeanor. Some people would even prostrate themselves before her. However, today, Shilanling slowly walked forward, still as otherworldly as before, like an otherworldly blue lotus. But in exchange, Muyan and Ying Mai only stared at her indifferently. Muyan looks at Ying Mai. "Do you know them?" Ying Mai shakes her head, "I don't. They're probably actors hired by Han Yi. Miss Jun, let's not delay here any longer, Jun Shong is waiting for you." After saying that, he didn't even look at Shilanling and Rui Zhu again and was about to leave. Lingren! 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 Shilanling felt as if she had been struck by lightning. She simply couldn't believe what she had heard. Wherever she, Shilanling, went, she would be sought after by tens of thousands of people. These two people actually dared to treat her as a performer. Rui Zhu was so angry that her face was twisted. "You! What nonsense are you talking about? You two lowly maids, do you know who my miss is?" Ying Mai looked at them coldly. The long sword in his hand is unsheathed, overflowing with murderous intent. "If you're not performers invited by Han Yi, then why can you come in? Don't you know that any outsiders who enter the Emperor Garden will be killed without mercy?" The icy killing intent and the powerful pressure caused Rui Zhu's expression to change slightly. She staggered 2 steps back. It took him a lot of effort to stabilize himself. His already ugly expression became even fiercer. "Who the hell are you? Aren't you just 2 servants from the Emperor Garden? How dare you shout at my young miss?" Chapter 351. Hearing Rui Zhu's Ghost City's esteemed guest. Muyan finally lifts her eyelids, looking over with a smile that isn't a smile. "Esteemed guest. You're Shilanling?" Shilanling nods haughtily, about to speak. Abruptly meeting Muyan's face, her heart thumps. The appearance of this maid in front of her is really too outstanding. Although Shilanling is unwilling to admit it. But this lowly servant is actually more beautiful than her. How can she accept this? On the contrary, Ruizhu is the first to react. Raising her chin, she arrogantly says, "Since you know who my family's miss is, still not leading the way. If you delay my family's miss and Jun Shong's meeting, I'm afraid that you two servants won't be able to bear the consequences." Ying Mai's face sinks, unable to bear it any longer. She's about to make a move. She can tolerate this so-called Shixianzi humiliating her, but she can't stand Miss Jun being humiliated. However, Muyan stops Ying Mai's actions. "Want to see Jun Shong?" Her pink lips rise up into a pretty curve. "Since it's Shixianzi's order, we will certainly obey." Pausing, her smile becomes more and more meaningful. "Presumably, when Jun Shong sees you, he will certainly be very happy." Ying Mai glances at Muyan in shock, looking anxious. Opening his mouth, he seems to want to say something. Ruizhu has already supported Shilanling, her face full of pride. "At least you still have a bit of self-awareness. What are you still standing there for, still not leading the way?" Muyan smiles faintly, then turns around and heads in the direction of the dining hall. Ying Mai frowns and promptly follows. Shilanling glances at Muyan's back, a mocking smile appearing at the bottom of her clear and cold eyes. So what if she's beautiful? In the end, a servant is just a servant. Hearing her name, won't they still obediently give in? Doesn't this mean that Di Jun has always treated her differently? Otherwise, how could the servants of the Emperor Garden become so respectful and fawning after hearing her name? Thinking of this, a bashful and expectant smile appears on Shilanling's face. The three soon arrive at one of the small courtyards. This is also the place where Di Mingju personally cooked for Muyan that day. Shilanling could faintly see the tall and straight figure of the man through the open door of the small courtyard. Even from such a distance, she could feel the man's disdainful aura. Shilanling's heart was thumping non-stop. Her cheeks were dyed red. Her eyes, which were usually cold and indifferent, were now filled with passion and infatuation. When Ruizhu sees her miss's expression, she immediately steps forward and pushes Muyan and Ying Mai away. Pulling Shilanling along, he directly flits past the two people, heading straight towards Di Mingju. In the small courtyard of the dining hall, Di Mingju looks at the table of dishes that are slowly turning cold, his expression frighteningly gloomy. On the side, Han Yi is trembling with fear, wishing that he could immediately make a clean getaway. Unfortunately, he did not dare. What was Little Shadow doing? Why haven't they invited Miss Jun yet? Don't you know that in order to prepare this meal, Jun Shong got up early in the morning to get busy? This was because Miss Jun would only reveal a truly happy smile when she was eating delicious food. Suddenly, Han Yi sees a figure outside the courtyard, and his eyes brighten. "Jun Shong, it's Miss Jun has come." Hearing that, Di Mingju's expression doesn't change. Chapter 352. At the same time, Han Yi also sees Ying Mai's tall figure, and his heart unconsciously speeds up. Just as he was about to open his mouth to greet them, he saw Mu Yang and Ying Mai being pushed away. Because the action was too sudden, Ying Mai staggered a little. On the other hand, Muyan seems to have expected this, and leisurely retreats to the side. There's a smile on the corner of his mouth, like he's watching a good show. He watches as Ruizhu supports Shilanling, leisurely arriving in front of Di Mingju. "My daughter, Shilanling," greets the emperor. A soft and crisp voice rang out. Shilanling bowed slightly, her skirt fluttering in the wind. She raised her small face, elegant and refined, with just the right amount of peach blossom blush. She was truly more beautiful than a flower, and her feelings were boundless. Han Yi shivers, goosebumps almost covering the floor. Could this Shilanling speak properly? To him, she speaks coldly, and to Jun Shong, she speaks coquettishly, making him want to vomit. Hearing the voice, Di Mingju retracts his gaze from Mu Yang and falls on the beauty in front of him. Shilanling? Whether it was his voice or his gaze, they were so cold that they could freeze someone to death. Shilanling's maiden heart was beating wildly because of this handsome man who was so close to her. She didn't notice anything wrong at all. Her smile became more tender and shy, and her voice became sweeter and sweeter. "Yes, I am. I'm here today to deliver the golden elixir of 9 orifices to you. When Shalanling says these words, she's waiting for Di Mingju to ask in amazement, "You actually refined the 9 orifices golden pill?" Who knew that Di Mingju wouldn't even spare Shalanling a glance, but coldly looks at Han Yi instead. Han Yi is swept by Di Mingju's cold and austere gaze, his legs almost go soft and he kneels down. Then, a voice as cold as Azura's from hell sounded, "Go to the purgatory pool and receive your punishment for 5 days. Han Yi suddenly feels his vision darken. The purgatory pool was a place where one would lose a layer of skin. Although the Yenwu continent's ghost city's purgatory pool only has 1/10 of the power of the polar domain's purgatory pool. But it was still very, very scary. "Lord, this subordinate has been wronged." Han Yi couldn't help but wail. This subordinate told her clearly that after the elixir is refined, this subordinate will go and take it myself. Di Mingju's voice doesn't rise or fall, but his expression becomes colder. 10 days. Han Yi shudders, no longer daring to quibble. He bows and mournfully says, "This subordinate accepts the order." Boo-hoo-hoo, ever since Jun Shong got to know Miss Muyin, he's become a lot more humane. So much so that he had almost forgotten how cruel and uncompromising Jun Shong was in the past. Shalanling naturally heard the conversation between the two of them. Naturally, she doesn't have a good impression of Han Yi, this guard who has eyes on the top of his head. So what if he was the emperor's trusted aide? She wasn't even a servant, but she was talking to her in such a cold and arrogant manner. But she wants to make a good impression in front of Di Mingju. So she immediately takes a step forward, with an anxious and guilty look on her face. Her limpid eyes look at Di Mingju. "Di Jun, please calm your anger. This little girl came uninvited because she was anxious to deliver the elixir to Jun Shong. This little girl knows that this 9 orifices golden dan is very important to Di Jun. If Di Jun wants to blame someone, then please blame this little girl. This matter has nothing to do with Han Yi, who knew that before Shalanling could finish pleading for leniency Di Mingju doesn't react, but Han Yi has already impatiently interrupted her. "Shixianzi, where's the elixir?" Chapter 353. Shalanling's complexion immediately stiffens. With great difficulty, she manages to maintain a somewhat wronged expression, but it's also stubborn and proud as she looks towards Di Mingju. She was waiting for him to say something. However, Di Mingju doesn't even spare her a glance. His gaze is firmly fixed on a spot not far from the entrance. The expression on his handsome face becomes more and more gloomy. Han Yi impatiently says, "Shixianzi, didn't you say you came to deliver elixirs? What, you're not willing to take it out now that you're here? Don't tell me you haven't refined the golden pill of 9 orifices at all?" Shalanling clenches her teeth. She simply hates Han Yi to the extreme in her heart. A mere servant actually dared to treat her like this. But Han Yi's words have already reached this point, so Shalanling can only take out the brocade box from her bosom. She deliberately avoids Han Yi, and steps towards Di Mingju. With every step she took, the bashfulness and anticipation on her face deepened. As long as she was a little closer to this man, a little closer, she would personally hand over the 9 orifices golden pill that she had refined. He would definitely have a whole new level of respect for him. However, when Shalanling is about a meter away from Di Mingju, suddenly, he felt a gust of wind blow past him. Then, the brocade box in her hand disappeared. Han Yi holds the brocade box in his hand, respectfully handing it over to Di Mingju. Soon after, he looks at Shalanling with a bit of ridicule. "I'm sorry, Shixianzi, my family's Jun Shong doesn't like outsiders to get close to him. Please stand a bit further away, lest you make my family's Jun Shong unhappy." Shalanling's face was so stiff that it looked like it was about to twist. Han Yi's words can be considered pleasant to hear, but that expression and attitude, he was clearly saying, "Don't get close to Jun Shong, lest you make Jun Shong feel disgusted." She, Shalanling, is the only alchemist in the Yenwu continent. When and where has she ever suffered such humiliation? Di Mingju takes the brocade box and opens it to take a look. After confirming that the elixir inside has the effect he wants, his expression softens a little. Han Yi immediately smiles and says, "Shixianzi, since the elixir has been delivered, you can leave now." This time, Shalanling's face really twisted. But soon, she calmed down. Because from beginning to end, Ming-ju hasn't said a word. In Shilanling's mind, all this disrespect and indifference towards her is nothing more than Han Yi acting on his own initiative. Therefore, she quickly takes the food box from Ruiju's hands, a gentle and virtuous smile hanging on her face. Jun, this is the medicinal cuisine that I've personally made for you. The drafts and herbs that I've added are all very valuable. I hope that Jun doesn't dislike it. As he spoke, the food box was opened. The aroma of food finally filled the air. Because of the addition of special herbs, the aroma of these foods is even more enticing than the breakfast that Ming-ju personally made. Mu Yang, who was just leisurely watching the show, couldn't help but sniff and look at the food box. It looks quite delicious. Ming-ju is simply more familiar with Muyan's little expressions and movements than she is with herself. Seeing this scene, his face immediately turned frighteningly dark. Unfortunately, Ruiju still adds in a low voice, Jun Shong, you don't know, but our Mrs. Medicinal Cuisine is famous throughout the entire Yenwu continent. How many people want to ask for a meal and they spend hundreds of thousands of gold, but our Miss has never agreed. However, Ruiju did not finish her sentence. Ming-ju finally couldn't bear it anymore, and he strides in front of Muyan. Grabbing the girl's slender wrist, he pulls her into his arms. How long are you going to stay there? Chapter 354. Her tall nose wrinkled slightly, and her usually sparkling peach blossom eyes were watery. She looked inexplicably pitiful. Ming-ju's chest warmed up. He wanted to pull her into his arms, but he also felt sorry for her. His hand roughly and clumsily pressed on the tip of his slightly red nose and rubbed it. How could you be so careless? Mu Yang's nose is about to go crooked from anger. This bastard, he was clearly the one who pulled her, causing her to bump into him. And now he was blaming himself for being careless? But without waiting for her to refute, Ming-ju has already unyieldingly dragged her to the dining table. His voice was still cold, and his expression was still emotionless, but there was a hint of cloying gentleness in his eyes. Do you know what time it is now? It's so late in the morning and you're still not having breakfast. Do you want to starve to death? Mu Yang looks up at the sky. Jun Shong's ability to lie through his teeth is really getting stronger and stronger. It was only 7 in the morning, so where did the sun come from? Mu Yang touches her nose, sweeping her eyes over Shilanling with a smile that isn't a smile. Isn't this because I'm afraid of disturbing you and the beauty's rendezvous? On the side, Shilanling looks like she's seen a ghost as she glares at Muyan and Ming-ju. Wasn't this woman a servant? Wasn't she a servant? Why is the emperor, who treats me so bluntly, treating this woman so differently? Then he looks at Muyan's small hand that Ming-ju is holding tightly in his palm. Shilanling could no longer maintain the tranquility and otherworldliness in her eyes. Intense jealousy and hatred almost turned into flames of jealousy, spurting out from her eyes. She can't even get within 1 meter of Ming-ju. But how could this woman, this lowly woman, be so close to the emperor? What right does she have? Ruiju was also dumbfounded. She was only halfway through her words of praise for her young miss, and now she felt awkward. She didn't know if she should continue. Jun Shong, this medicinal cuisine is really, really priceless. Others wouldn't be able to get it even if they begged for it, but young miss personally cooked for you and busied herself for an entire night. As soon as these words come out, Ming-ju and Mu Yang's attention is immediately pulled back. The reason was that Shilanling's medicinal cuisine was indeed very fragrant and very famous. In her previous life, Muyan had heard of the rarity and preciousness of Shixian's medicinal cuisine. Even Gong Qianxue had held it in high esteem, but she didn't have the chance to taste it. She couldn't help but sniffle and look into the food box again. However, just as she stretched her head over, her chin was grabbed by a thick palm. Her attention was forcefully pulled back to the man. Do you really want to eat it? The man asked slowly in a low and cold voice. Mu Yang nodded without hesitation. Shilanling and Ruiju's faces, which had just eased up, suddenly froze again. The corner of Ming-ju's mouth hooks up into a shallow arc. His appearance was already extremely beautiful, so beautiful that it could take one's breath away. Now that he was smiling like this, he was like the blazing sun, dazzling like fireworks, and could even hook away one's soul. However, Mu Yang is only in a trance for a moment. She heard the man say in a cold and resolute voice, "You're not allowed to eat it." Shi Lanling's originally stiff expression immediately turns joyful, her pair of bright eyes looking towards Di Mingju. As expected, the Celestial Emperor could sense his feelings for him. He couldn't possibly allow a lowly servant to taint the medicinal cuisine that he had made with his own hands. But today, it was destined to be the day when Shi Lanling's face would be slapped resoundingly. Chapter 355. The man slightly narrows his eyes and leans closer to Mu Yang, slowly saying, "You're not picky at all. What kind of unclean and unfashionable thing, you dare to eat it?" After a pause, he coldly adds, "Is what Ben Jun personally made not comparable to these?" The man can be said to be somewhat gnashing his teeth as he says the last sentence. Mu Yang is dumbfounded. Wait a minute. Since when did the Yenwu continent's hard-to-find medicinal cuisine become something unclean and unfit for use? And Jun Shongdaran, you could compare with anyone else, but you actually compare cooking skills with a woman? Where's your integrity? It's just that the unhappy Jun Shong has no integrity. He doesn't wait for Mu Yang to react, and directly waves his hand to have the medicinal cuisine brought by Shi Lanling be given to the servants in the Emperor Garden's outer courtyard. He himself forcibly pulls Mu Yang to sit down at the table, and carries out the daily feeding work. Probably because she's used to being fed by Di Mingju these past few days. Mu Yang eats the delicious breakfast, completely without any discomfort. Even in her heart, there's a faint sweet joy that even she herself isn't aware of. As for where that sweet joy comes from, Mu Yang doesn't dare to delve into it. However, Shi Lanling, who has been slapped in the face again and again, can no longer control the shame and indignation that rises from the bottom of her heart. Her whole body can't help but tremble. Since she was born, she has never suffered such humiliation. Who is this woman? Who is she to snatch away her elegance, to snatch away her man? Just a mere servant, what right does she have? Shixianzi, please go back. The Emperor Garden does not entertain guests. Han Yi indifferently repeats his order to expel the guest. There's already a hint of impatience in his voice. He saw how this woman pushed Little Shadow just now. What kind of thing is that? Not even fit to carry Miss Jun's shoes. She actually has the nerve to think about their Jun Shong. She's so shameless. Who is she? Shi Lanling doesn't leave, but she forcefully suppresses the surging resentment in her heart, saying one word at a time, "Who is this woman? Isn't she a servant of the Emperor Garden? Just a mere servant, how could she?" Servant. Han Yi sneers, interrupting Shi Lanling's words. His eyes are filled with ridicule. "I'm afraid that Shixianzi is mistaken. Not only is Miss Jun not a servant, but she is also our Emperor Garden's most distinguished guest and even the future Empress of the Emperor Garden. If anyone dares to insult young Lady Jun, it is the same as insulting the Emperor Garden and insulting you, Jun Shong. Before Fairy Shi speaks, it would be best for you to think clearly about what you should say and what you should not." "Mistress." Shi Lanling's voice suddenly rose, sharp and thin. But she immediately realized her gaffe and forced herself to calm down. "Miss Jun? Which Miss Jun? How come I've never heard of it?" Suddenly, Shi Lanling's voice paused, and her pupils contracted slightly. Could it be that she's the Enchantress of Medicine, Jun Muyan, who's currently in the limelight in Tianyuan City? Wasn't she the legendary music doctor who could bring the dead back to life and snatch lives from the hands of the King of Hell? Han Yi immediately lifts his chin, a proud and smug look on his face. Not bad. Although he already knew that Miss Jun wasn't simple. But he didn't expect that in just a few short days, Miss Jun would not only cause a sensation in Xi'an, but now that she's come to Tianyuan City, she even directly pierced through the sky of Tianyuan City. Chapter 356. Shi Lanling's face alternated between green and white. Across the hall, his gaze firmly falls on Muyan's face. His eyes are full of jealousy and unwillingness. It turns out that this woman isn't a servant, but the doctor that Chinga said was trying to seduce Mingju. The Enchantress Mu Yang. Humph, so what if he's a senior doctor? Without knowing how to concoct pills and medicine, no matter how formidable a physician was, he could only treat and save people. Unlike him, whose pills were unparalleled in the world. Not only could it heal, but it could also help martial artists raise their cultivation. What's more, Shi Lanling, was already at the middle heaven stage at such a young age. Regardless of appearance, strength, or status, he would not lose to this woman. Right now, Mingju is gentle and protective of her, but it's only because she's beautiful that he treats her as a plaything. How could a plaything be a match for a man as aloof as Mingju? One day, Jun Muyan will be tired of being played with, and she will be discarded. One day, the emperor would realize that only she was the most suitable for him, and only she was worthy of him. What was Jun Muyan? Could she refine the golden elixir of 9 orifices that the emperor needed the most? Lanling's eyes lit up at the thought of the golden elixir of 9 orifices. Seeing that she won't leave no matter what, Han Yi impatiently steps forward to pull her away. However, Lanling suddenly stepped forward and said in a gentle and concerned voice, "Emperor, Lanling suddenly remembered that I forgot to tell you about the golden elixir of 9 orifices." Just at this time, Mingju and Muyan have also finished eating. Mingju personally wipes the corners of Muyan's mouth and hands with a cloth, then he pulls her up. Hearing this, he couldn't help but look at Lanling. Lanling met the man's cold and exquisite eyes, that unparalleled handsome face, and her breathing suddenly became a little hurried. His voice was slightly stuttering as he said, "Emperor, the golden elixir of 9 orifices is extremely potent. Even a Carnate Realm martial artist might be injured if he were to consume it. When you consume it, you must be careful. It would be best if Lan Ling stays by your side. If anything happens, Lan Ling can help you as an alchemist and doctor." Hearing that, Mingju raises his brows and releases Muyan's hand. With a flick of his wrist, the brocade box that Lanling had just given him appeared in his palm. When the brocade box was opened, the golden pill of 9 apertures inside faintly emitted a refreshing medicinal fragrance. It was a little like the dark cloud spirit flowers fragrance, but it seemed to have something more to it. Under everyone's gaze, Mingju picks up the pill and puts it into his mouth. Lanling's eyes suddenly burst with excitement. Ha ha! Her guess was right. What the emperor really needed was a woman who was useful to him. So what if Jun Muyan has a charming appearance? Could she concoct pills like him? Would he be able to help her in her breakthrough as a sovereign emperor? How could a good-for-nothing woman compete with him? Lanling thought to herself as she lifted her skirt and walked forward. Han Yi holds out his hand to stop her from approaching. However, Lanling glared at him coldly. "Didn't you see that the emperor has already taken the 9 orifices golden pill? Without me by your side, can you bear the backlash of the golden elixir of 9 orifices?" Han Yi doesn't loosen his grip to let her go. Instead, he looks at her with a fake smile. That smile was indescribably sarcastic. It could even be said that it was pity. Lanling frowned and was about to berate him. Chapter 357. Mingju puts the 9 orifices golden pill into his mouth, but after a few breaths. Suddenly, he grabs Muyan's waist and pulls her into his embrace. Then, he kisses those soft petal-like lips. Mu Yang's expression slightly changes, and she is about to struggle. What the hell was this man doing? Acting like a hooligan in public? However, in the next moment, she felt a cool and refreshing aura enter her body through their entwined lips and tongues. Lanling's body stiffened as she stared at the scene in front of her. She was not a fool. She could sense that this was no ordinary kiss. Instead, Mingju is using himself to remove the domineering cold chi from the 9 orifices golden dan, and then transfer the purified and purest medicinal power to Jun Muyan. It could be said that the golden elixir of 9 orifices was a rare elixir that was hard to find in the world. However, even if the golden elixir of 9 orifices could be refined, it would still have flaws. However, Mingju spent countless manpower and resources to cultivate the dark cloud spirit flower and other auxiliary drafts for Muyan. He even offered her a high price to refine the golden elixir of 9 orifices. Now, he was disregarding any possible damage to his body as he dispelled the cold aura of the pill. Just to let Muyan absorb the power of the 9 apertures golden dan? Why? Why did this man have to go through so much trouble for a lowly servant? Why didn't Mingju waste his thoughts on her? How is Jun Muyan stronger than her? On the side, Han Yi looks at Shalanling's unsightly complexion, and is in a very good mood. However, on the surface, he was still all smiles as he said, "Shixianzi, look at my family's Jun Shong and my future wife, they're so affectionate as if there's no one else around. But it's not good for an outsider to watch from the side. Fairy Sha, please." This is the 3rd time that Han Yi has asked the guest to leave. This time, Shalanling and Ruizhu had no reason to stay. Shalanling couldn't even stay a minute longer. The scene in front of her made her so embarrassed that she wanted to find a hole to hide in. Under Han Yi's guidance, she left the Emperor Garden like a walking corpse. If one were to say how shy and expectant she had been when she had first arrived, then when she left, she would be so ashamed and jealous. Then, this jealousy slowly turned into bone-deep resentment. If it weren't for Jun Muyan, Jun would certainly have a whole new level of respect for her. If it weren't for Jun Muyan, she wouldn't have suffered such humiliation today. Isn't he just a third-rate physician? He actually wanted to compete with her. He was simply daydreaming. Shalanling's elegant face slowly twisted into a sinister and vicious expression. However, it only lasted for an instant before it dissipated completely, returning to its prideful state. On the other side, Han Yi very cleverly cleans up everyone present. The medicinal power of the 9 orifices golden elixir was purified little by little and passed into Mu Yang's body. After about a quarter of an hour, the effects of the medicine have completely passed through Mu Yang's body. Mu Yang feels that there's a melting heat rolling in her dantian. She reaches out, wanting to push Mingju away. Unexpectedly, the man hugged her even tighter and kissed her even deeper. Only when the skin all over Mu Yang's body starts to heat up, does Mingju reluctantly release the red and swollen lips that he kissed. Muyan fiercely glares at this shameless man. Was this bastard giving her medicine or taking advantage of her? It's just that Muyan doesn't know that not only does her blushing cheeks and coquettish glare not have any lethality, but it's also indescribably seductive. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.